The giant head reared up along with the enormous body that it was attached to, rising up into the sky like a winding behemoth. The bridge that had emerged earlier also rose up into the heavens along with it. Only after it had completely ascended into the sky did everyone come to realize that the owner of the giant head was a huge black dragon that was over 100,000 feet in length. The dragon had a pair of sharp curved horns that were giving off a menacing black gleam, and black smoke was swirling all around its enormous body, which obscured virtually the entire sky, plunging a large area around the white jade peak into complete darkness. What was even more astonishing was that the dragon had a very strange head with a human face that was countless times more massive than a normal human face. The expressions of all of the dozens of deputy Dao lords, situated several thousand kilometers to the west, immediately changed drastically upon seeing this. Among them, even those who had stayed in the Blaze Dragon Dao for the shortest amount of time had already been here for over 100,000 years, yet they had never seen or even heard of such a formidable beast lurking under the white jade peak. Could this be the Blaze Dragon? Xingshan murmured with an astonished expression. Could it be that this is what's been making all those strange sounds under the mountain range? Another deputy Dao Lord speculated with a bewildered expression. That's most likely the case. Many years ago, while venturing deep into the underground fire veins to collect crimson fire essence, I detected an indistinct aura. At the time, I paid it no heed, but thinking back, that aura was virtually identical to the aura of this beast, a thin, elderly man said with an enlightened expression. But why does its face look like that? Isn't that Dao Lord Bailey's face? On the origin view peak, Han Li was looking at the enormous beast from afar, and the snippets of information that he had previously read about the primordial beast, the Blaze Dragon, quickly flashed through his mind. Indeed, its physical description was almost a complete match with this gargantuan beast with only some minute differences. For example, it was described that the face of the Blaze Dragon was only very slightly resembling that of a human, but this Blaze Dragon's face bore a striking resemblance to Bailey Yan. Could it be that this is Dao Lord Bailey's true body? As soon as this thought crossed Han Li's mind, it was immediately dismissed. This strange Blaze Dragon's eyes were filled entirely with scorching black flames and had no pupils, clearly indicating that it wasn't an intelligent creature. Even if it did have something to do with Bailey Yan, it was much more likely that it was an avatar of his. Furthermore, for some reason, as soon as the giant Blaze Dragon appeared, Han Li immediately felt a strong sense of aversion to it deep within his soul. He discovered that the black flames burning all over the Blaze Dragon's body seemed to have been imbued with extremely formidable baleful qi, more formidable than any that he had ever felt before. Meanwhile, on the giant blue flower hovering in the sky, several thousand kilometers to the north of the white jade peak, the initially calm and unperturbed vast flow palace cultivators now all had astonished looks on their faces, and they were too stunned to speak. At this point, Luo Qinghai had also stood up from his golden throne, and he was staring intently at the enormous Blaze Dragon. Only after a long while did he return to his senses before murmuring to himself, "I had thought that you had only gone into seclusion to delay the onset of the 5 decays, but never had I anticipated that you would have already overcome the 5 decays by forging such a unique path. How unfortunate! If you had been given just 10,000 more years, the northern glacial Immortal region would have been no match for you." The effeminate man behind him approached him with an uncertain expression, then asked, "Master, what should we do now?" "All of you watch carefully. This is an extremely rare opportunity. Even if the Immortal Palace manages to get what they want, it'll almost certainly be at an extremely heavy cost." Luo Qinghai chuckled as he sat back down onto his throne and continued to observe the battle. Bailey Yan's body was enveloped in a layer of rainbow light, and he was holding a crimson immortal sword in one hand and an octagonal fiery red mirror in the other, standing several thousand feet away from Zhao Jinhan. The entire area within a radius of 20,000 to 30,000 feet around him was enveloped within a near-transparent hemispherical light barrier with white light surging over its surface, and it was also riddled with countless snowflake patterns that were giving off cold glacial chi. There were around a dozen immortal palace cultivators, including Zhu Weiying, distributed around the light barrier, and each of them was holding a white jade tablet that they were injecting their immortal spiritual power into. Over half of them were golden immortal cultivators, while the rest were all late true immortal cultivators, and it appeared that they had trapped Bailey Yan here, but they hadn't actually managed to gain the upper hand at all. Bailey Yan, it's no wonder the Heavenly Court views you as such a potent threat. You are indeed a remarkable man, Zhao Jinhan said as he cast his gaze toward the blazed dragon in the distance. There are no unremarkable people among those who have reached our cultivation base, Bailey Yan replied with a cold smile. In any case, we made the right decision to come here today. Otherwise, if we had given you 10,000 more years, you would have been the one actively knocking on our northern glacial immortal region's door, and we would have certainly been no match for the high zenith stage jade immortal that you would have become, Zhao Jinhan. What makes you think you're a match for me now? Bailey Yan sneered. In the sky above the white jade peak, an earth-shattering roar rang out as the blazed dragon twisted its body from side to side, rising up toward Bailey Yan. Right as it was about to pass through the clouds up above, the severely ravaged ground down below abruptly shuddered, following which an enormous formation projection appeared before releasing a vast expanse of dazzling golden radiance. 8 huge golden pillars, each with a golden dragon coiled around them, rose up around the blazed dragon, swelling to over 100,000 feet tall in the span of just a few seconds, and the pillars were riddled with runes that were giving off more golden light. Atop each pillar stood an immortal palace, golden palace, all of whom were chanting incantations while making hand seals to activate the formation. One of the golden immortals standing on the pillars was none other than Qinghai, and at the same time, the woman in the pink palace dress suddenly appeared in the sky above the blazed dragon with her white gyukin hovering in front of her. She stroked her fingers over the strings of the instrument, and a burst of peculiar music suddenly rang out from the 8 giant golden pillars, following which the 8 massive golden dragons coiled around the pillars abruptly sprang to life. A collective draconic roar rang out as the 8 golden dragons pounced out of the giant pillars, plunging headfirst into the black flames to tear at the blazed dragon with their claws and fangs. Within the black flames, the 8 golden dragons wrapped themselves around the blazed dragon before opening their cavernous mouths and sinking their fangs into the blazed dragon's body, only to find that they were unable to even bite through its scales. The blazed dragon let loose a thunderous roar as it began to thrash around violently in an attempt to shake off the golden dragons. As a result, it was constantly crashing into the giant golden pillars, causing a massive commotion. However, the golden pillars remained completely unmoved, and it was as if they were a permanent fixture between heaven and earth. This formation was even more formidable than the golden scale dragon locking formation, and the blazed dragon was unable to break free. All of a sudden, Luo Qinghai rose up into the sky as a streak of dazzling golden light, then raised a hand to summon a black ox horn bow. The bow's design was very simplistic, as if it had been crafted without much care, and there weren't any adornments or even runes on its surface. All it did was give off a faint black sheen, and it had a very antiquated appearance. Luo Qinghai cast his gaze toward the thrashing blazed dragon, then lunged forward and slowly drew the bow back. As he did so, the muscles on his arms bulged and trembled incessantly, indicating that he was experiencing a great deal of strain. The bow was slowly being drawn back, and as the bowstring came into contact with his chin, wisps of silver light began to appear between his hands, then connected together to form a shimmering silver arrow that was aimed straight at the blaze dragon's head. Lu Yue's fingers had been sliced open by the bowstring, and blood was pouring out of the gashes, only to be absorbed by the bow. However, his aura was rather restrained, and he remained completely still, seemingly in no hurry to fire the arrow. At the same time, a tiny speck of silver light appeared on the tip of the arrow, and initially it was rather indistinct, but it was becoming more and more substantial and giving off bursts of law fluctuations. The blaze dragon struggles continued to prove futile, and it was becoming more and more furious by the second. It twisted around and opened its cavernous mouth to blast forth a stream of ferocious black flames to incinerate, and compared with the black flames on its body, the fire being blasted out of its mouth was even hotter and imbued with more fierce baleful qi. In mere moments, the 8 golden dragons began to wilt under the intense heat, looking as if they were about to melt away. The 8 golden immortals standing atop the golden pillars were also feeling the heat, and their blood circulation had sped up by severalfold, while a sense of agitation welled up in their hearts, as if they were being roasted in a fiery pit. Finally, one of the early golden immortal cultivators was unable to withstand the heat any longer, and he involuntarily threw up a mouthful of blood. Immediately thereafter, Gujai also threw up a mouthful of blood, having already sustained severe injuries from the blow dealt upon him by the Crimson Luan sword. As a result, the entire formation had been destabilized, and it looked as if it could collapse at any moment. Right as the surrounding golden pillars were about to be toppled, Dong Jai suddenly appeared in the sky in a flash, and through the use of some type of secret technique, he had expanded his own body to over 10,000 feet tall. He was holding an enormous axe that he swung up into the sky with both hands while leaping into the air, then swung his axe down toward the blaze dragon's neck. Dazzling black light erupted out of the runes engraved onto the blade of the axe, and it began to release formidable tearing force that caused the surrounding space to warp and twist. Right as the axe was about to tear through the black flames and strike the blaze dragon's neck, a burst of crimson light suddenly shot out of the top of the blaze dragon's head like lightning, then rapidly expanded while flying through the air, transforming into a giant crimson sword that was several thousand feet in length before striking the sharp edge of the axe. A resounding boom rang out as a blinding crimson sun exploded in the sky, sending countless bursts of fire hurtling toward the sharp edge of the giant axe. The axe appeared to have been swinging through the air with unstoppable force, but it was snapped with a resounding crack, while the huge crimson sword pierced straight through Dong Jai's chest. A huge gash was instantly torn open on his chest, yet before blood had a chance to flow out of the wound, it was evaporated by the scorching flames burning on the giant sword. Dong Jai swayed a few times before plummeting out of the sky as his body rapidly shrank back down to its original size, while the giant crimson sword flew back to position itself above the blaze dragon's head again. Immediately thereafter, the sword also shrank down rapidly, and Taoist Hu Yan stumbled out of it with an ashen complexion while gasping for air. Just now, he had drawn upon the blood essence in his own body to fuse as one with his crimson Luan sword, and only then was he able to severely wound Dong Jai with a single strike. Despite how severely taxed he was, he didn't immediately swallow any pills to assist in his recovery. Instead, he cast his gaze toward the woman in the pink palace dress. A burst of indistinct white light abruptly appeared behind her, following which Yun Nai emerged amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, then lashed out toward the woman's back with the green willow branch that she was holding. azure light was searching all over the willow branch, and as it was swung through the air, countless willow leaf-shaped blades of light were instantly released, sweeping directly toward the woman's back. At this moment, the woman in the pink palace dress had her attention focused entirely on stabilizing the formation, which was on the verge of collapse, and by the time she detected what was happening behind her, it was already too late. The silk streamer that was draped over her shoulders immediately began to glow brightly, then rose up into the air to oppose the willow branch. At the same time, a streak of light flashed through the air as Ayang Qiushan rapidly approached the scene from afar with a complex look on his face, holding a golden longsword that he was plunging directly toward Yun Nai's heart. A hint of finality flashed through Yun Nai's eyes upon seeing this, and she made no effort to take evasive measures, seemingly determined to go through with her attack even at the cost of her own life. The flurry of willow leaf blades we instantly tore a gash into the silk streamer before crashing heavily into the woman's back, shredding through the protective spiritual light around her as her entire body pitched forward, and she threw up a mouthful of blood that splattered all over her gyukin. At the same time, Aoyang Qiushan had also arrived on the scene, yet right as his sword was about to plunge through Yun Nai's heart, he suddenly twisted his wrist slightly to direct his sword away from its original trajectory, piercing it through Yun Nai's shoulder instead. "Is it really worth going so far for him?" he asked as a pained look flashed through his eyes. Yun Nai merely smiled and offered no response as her entire body scattered into countless white flower petals. In the next instant, she reappeared beside Taoist Hu Yan. Immediately thereafter, yet another earth-shattering roar rang out, and the black flames over the blazed dragon's body reared up significantly as it swiveled around in the sky, thrashing against the formation that it was trapped in with ferocious might. The surrounding golden pillars were already quite unstable, and the entire formation began to collapse toward the center in the face of the blazed dragon's tremendous power. As the blazed dragon reared up with all its might, the golden dragons coiled around its body were finally snapped into pieces before disintegrating into countless specks of golden light. Immediately thereafter, the 8 golden pillars exploded violently into an enormous arc of golden light that erupted in all directions. The 8 golden immortals that were overseeing the formation were all struck by backlash in the wake of the formation's destruction, and they plummeted out of the sky with blood gushing out of their mouths. Upon breaking free from the formation, the blazed dragon continued to ascend, flying straight through the clouds before arriving on the other battlefield. The space there was encompassed within a massive white light barrier, within which gusts of frosty wind that were interspersed with countless snowflakes were howling incessantly, and even the clouds had begun to freeze over, transforming them ice statues of all types of strange shapes and forms, making one feel as if they had suddenly arrived on the infernal frost continent. "That's Zhao Jinhan's golden immortal spirit domain," Taoist Hu Yan exclaimed. "There's Tao Lord Bailey," Yun Nai called out as she pointed at the light barrier from afar. Having already taken a restorative pill, the wound on her chest had already completely healed, but her complexion was still quite pale. At this point, she was pointing at a massive icy plaque that was hovering at the center of the area encompassed within the light barrier, and it was giving off formidable glacial qi. Trapped within the giant plaque was none other than Bailey Yan, and his body was enveloped within a layer of rainbow light that was flashing incessantly, seemingly desperately trying to keep the surrounding glacial qi at bay. Upon seeing the approaching blazed dragon, a complex look flashed through Bailey Yan's eyes. Meanwhile, Zhao Jinhan was standing atop the giant plaque with his hands resting atop the hilt of his sword. Hovering in the air behind him was a massive wheel of ice that was giving off radiant silver light, while also releasing a constant stream of silver runes. Whenever a rune came drifting down, It would flow down his longsword and land upon the giant plaque, further reinforcing it while also bolstering the glacial chi within it. A hint of fury flashed through Zhao Jinhan's eyes at the sight of the approaching blaze dragon, and he released the hilt of his sword to make a hand seal before sweeping a hand forward in a forceful fashion. Dazzling silver light erupted out of the wheel of ice behind him, conjuring up an enormous ice dragon that was over 100,000 feet in length above his head, before swooping down toward the blaze dragon. The two massive dragons clashed with an almighty boom, and the ice dragon began to shatter in layers starting from its head, disintegrating into a vast expanse of ice crystals, while the blaze dragon continued onward, flying directly toward the white light barrier. Right as its sharp horns were about to pierce through the light barrier, the sound of an arrow whistling through the air suddenly rang out across the entire sky. Having accumulated as much power as he could, Luo Qinghai had finally let loose HSI arrow. The silver arrow had a long fiery tail, and it was flying across the sky like a shooting star. A silver vortex was revolving rapidly on the tip of the arrow, causing all of the space in its wake to shudder violently, while boundless world's origin chi was converging from all directions before surging into the vortex. The silver arrow rapidly swelled in size as it flew through the air, quickly extending to over 10,000 feet in length from its initial length of 3 feet, and it punched a massive hole through the clouds before hurtling toward the blaze dragon's head from below. A thunderous boom rang out as a massive hole was shot through the blaze dragon's head, extending all the way from the bottom of its chin to the top of its head. The giant silver vortex remained in its head, causing even more world's origin chi to converge in a frenzy. The spiritual pressure there was constantly elevating, and it quickly reached an extremely formidable level. Taoist Huyan immediately grabbed onto Yun Nai's hand and flew away into the distance upon seeing this. He had only flown for just over 10,000 feet when a resounding boom rang out from behind him, and the silver vortex exploded violently, sending chaotic world's origin chi erupting in all directions, producing shockwaves that encompassed the entire surrounding area in a radius of 100 kilometers. Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai felt a vast wave of power sweeping toward them from behind, and both of them threw up a mouthful of blood in unison as they were swept involuntarily away into the distance like a pair of small rafts in an almighty storm. During the explosion, the silver vortex was constantly expanding to destroy the blaze dragon's massive head bit by bit, gradually reducing it to a cloud of dense black mist. However, instead of dissipating, all of the black mist surged into the white light barrier, then rapidly passed through the vast expanse of snow and ice without any inhibition, before converging entirely into the giant ice plaque. All of a sudden, a black sun exploded violently within the giant plaque, sending formidable shockwaves and countless ice crystals erupting in all directions. White light flashed over Zhao Jinhan's body as he instantly flew away from the giant plaque, while Zhu Weiying and the others were sent flying back by the explosion. Immediately thereafter, the wisps of black mist in the air converged to form Bailey Yan, who then slowly descended onto a frozen cloud. There was black mist surging all around his body, as well as a ball of black flames hovering above each of his shoulders. His red hair had turned completely black, and a small black fire spirit rune had appeared on his glabella, while his eyes had become a darker shade of black than before. It was as if he had suddenly transformed into a completely different person. At the same time, his aura had swelled by severalfold, and even the slightest gesture from him was enough to sweep up gusts of fierce wind. I went through so much trouble over the course of countless years to expel this karmic fire from my body, yet now I've been forced into remission. The heavenly Tao can truly be cruel. Bailey Yan mused in an expressionless manner as he cast his gaze toward Zhao Jinhan. This is the baleful immortal that's being hunted by the heavenly court. Having said that, in order to attain this power, you've doomed yourself to the fifth decay, Zhao Jinhan said with a cold expression. So be it. Seeing as things have already come to this point, let the karmic fire burn even brighter, Bailey Yan declared as a fierce look flashed through his eyes. As soon as his voice trailed off, a constant stream of black mist began to surge out of his body, forming a massive wall of black mist behind him. The wall of mist surged toward Zhao Jinhan, transforming into a black spirit domain that was slowly eating away at the white light barrier in the sky. At the same time, a cold look appeared in his eyes as he strode over the frozen cloud toward Zhao Jinhan. The clouds beneath his feet began to shatter amid a string of crisp cracking, while Luo Qinghai heaved a forlorn sigh as he observed the unfolding scene from down below. He's been forced into karmic fire remission. Let's go. With a wave of his hand, the giant blue flower flew away from the scene, carrying with it all of the vast Flow Palace cultivators. Thousands of kilometers away, Xingshan took one final glance up at the sky, then immediately flew away toward the west without any hesitation, and the other deputy Dao lords quickly departed as well, as did many of the true immortal stage elders on the Origin View Peak. The blue light in Han Li's eyes faded, and he turned his gaze toward Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai. Upon noticing that they were also fleeing the scene, he immediately decided to do the same. "I'll be going ahead, Brother Qi," he said to Qi Liang. The latter faltered slightly upon hearing this, then replied, "Farewell, Brother Li. I want to stay here for a while longer." A battle between a pair of cultivators at the pinnacle of the golden immortal stage was truly an extremely rare sight, and there were quite a few people like Qi Liang who were willing to take the risk to observe the battle in the hope that they would be able to benefit from it, perhaps even find a catalyst for a breakthrough. "Take care," Han Li said with a parting nod, then flew away as a streak of azure light. In the blink of an eye, the streak of azure light that Han Li had transformed into vanished into thin air, and when he reappeared a moment later, he was already hundreds of kilometers away. As soon as he emerged, he immediately continued onward. After getting a little further away, he immediately accelerated, covering a distance of tens of thousands of kilometers in the blink of an eye before descending near a secluded mountain. From there, he turned to take a glance back in the direction of the white jade peak before heaving a faint sigh. Regardless of whether the Blaze Dragon Dao would be able to weather this storm, he couldn't stay here any longer. In the wake of this incident, there would be no end to the troubles awaiting the Blaze Dragon Dao, and he was quite close with Taoist Hu Yan, so there was no telling whether he was going to be targeted as well. Most importantly, that silver-robed young man had struck him with a very strong sense of foreboding. He couldn't pinpoint why this was the case, but he had an unconscious urge to get as far away from him as possible. Upon withdrawing his gaze, Han Li made a hand seal, and arcs of golden lightning sprang out of his body to instantly form a lightning formation, immediately following which he vanished into thin air. Not long after Han Li vanished from this spot, several streaks of light came flying over from the white jade peak before dispersing in different directions. All of these people were members of the Blaze Dragon Dao, and there was no lack of true immortal stage elders among them. In the sky above a mountain in the Bel Tol mountain range, a blurry golden line flashed through the air, hurtling forward at an incredible speed. The golden line resembled an arc of lightning, and the space in its wake was rippling slightly, presenting a rather peculiar sight to behold. This was a movement technique that combined the powers of space and lightning. Lightning movement techniques allowed one to achieve a level of speed that was close to instantaneous teleportation, but they were two different things in that one. was only transforming oneself into a state of lightning in order to enhance their own speed. All of a sudden, the golden line began to slow down. A burst of invisible force had emerged in the space up ahead to obstruct the golden line, and it was as if it were moving through treacle. The more the golden line tried to force its way through, the more formidable the obstructive force became, and before long, the golden line had been slowed down significantly. All of a sudden, the nearby space rippled, and a golden lightning formation appeared, following which Han Li emerged at the center of the formation, amid a rumbling thunderclap. He swept his gaze forward momentarily, and his expression darkened slightly as he continued onward as a streak of azure light, covering several hundred kilometers in the blink of an eye before drawing to a halt. Up ahead was an enormous wall of yellow mist that extended straight up into the heavens, and there was no end to it in sight to the left or the right. The wall of yellow mist was constantly churning, taking on all types of different forms, such as clouds and ferocious beasts. Rays of yellow light were filtering through the mist, and one could just barely make out countless yellow formation patterns shimmering within it. The wall of mist was also giving off an incredibly dense and heavy aura, making one feel as if they were standing before an immovable mountain. Han Li flew over to the wall of mist, then attempted to release his spiritual sense into the wall, only for it to be instantly repelled upon contact. His brows furrowed slightly as he began to inspect the wall of mist with his bright-sight spirit eyes, and moments later, the blue light in his eyes faded as well as he murmured to himself, "This is an extremely formidable restriction." His lightning teleportation formation drew upon the power of space, so ordinary restrictions wouldn't have been able to contain it unless the restriction was also imbued with spatial power. Through the use of his bright-sight spirit eyes, he was able to see some of the finer details of the restriction, and he discovered that it contained a layer of dense and abundant spatial power, clearly indicating that it was a type of extremely formidable spatial restriction. In addition to that, there were also several other types of restrictions within the wall of mist, and they were combined together using very advanced techniques. Even for Han Li, breaking this restriction was going to take a very long time. He took a glance at his surroundings, then released his spiritual sense with all his might, and several moments later, he withdrew his spiritual sense as his expression darkened even further. The wall of mist was so vast that, even with his formidable spiritual sense, he was completely unable to detect where it began and where it concluded. However, judging from what he had been able to glean thus far, he could tell that his wall of yellow mist was an enormous spherical formation that encompassed a huge area around the White Jade Peak. He had passed through this place on his way to the White Jade Peak, but this restriction definitely hadn't been there at the time. This must have been set up in advance by the northern glacial Immortal region and those Dao lords of the Blaze Dragon Dao. It was clear that these people had been plotting and preparing extensively for this, with the objective of preventing Bailey Yan from getting away. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li swept a hand through the air, and 12 streaks of golden light shot out of his body, revealing themselves to be 12 lengths of lightning-restraining wood, all of which were riddled with complex lightning runes. The 12 lengths of lightning-restraining wood had been arranged into a formation, and as Han Li made a hand seal, all 12 lengths of lightning-restraining wood began to radiate dazzling golden light, following which an enormous lightning formation was conjured up, within which countless complex lightning runes were flashing incessantly. Han Li was situated inside the formation, and his body began to take on a semi-transparent appearance amid a rumbling thunderclap. However, in the next instant, the lightning formation suddenly began to tremble violently, and lightning was flashing erratically within it in a chaotic and uncontrolled fashion. A resounding boom rang out as the entire lightning formation exploded, and Han Li stumbled out into the open. After a brief pause, he swept a sleeve through the air to recover the 12 lengths of lightning-restraining wood, then cast his gaze toward the wall of yellow mist once again. Right at this moment, a vast black cloud suddenly appeared above his head, and countless rays of black light shone down from the heavens, raining directly down upon him. Han Li immediately vanished from the spot amid a flash of azure light, then reappeared tens of thousands of feet away. The countless rays of black light struck a mountain down below, instantly punching countless holes into it before toppling it entirely. Han Li raised his head to look up, right as 3 streaks of light descended out of the sky before fading to reveal a trio of humanoid figures, led by none other than the silver-robed young man. The 2 people accompanying him were dressed in black and standing slightly behind him in a respectful manner, seemingly serving as personal guards. One of them was a tall and portly man, while the other was quite short and as thin as a skeleton. What is the meaning of this? Your target is Bailey Yan. I'm just a minor character, so surely there's no reason for you to go out of your way to come after me, Han Li said. As he was speaking, he swept his spiritual sense over the trio in the discreet fashion, and his heart immediately sank slightly. The 2 guards dressed in black were both at the late true immortal stage, while the silver-robed young man's exact cultivation base was undetectable to him, indicating that he had either cultivated some type of concealment secret technique, or he was a golden immortal. Well, color me impressed. Not only have you not died from last time, you've become a late true immortal cultivator. I suppose I should congratulate you, the silver-robed young man mused, displaying no intention of answering Han Li's question. It sounds like we've met somewhere before, Han Li asked as his brows furrowed slightly. The silver-robed young man seemed to have been very amused to hear this, and he erupted into laughter, while Han Li looked on with an uncertain expression. There's no way he would remember what happened last time after being struck by your soul-destroying true light, young master. It's already a massive blessing for him that he hasn't been reduced to a blubbering idiot. The portly guard chuckled with a fawning smile on his face. The silver-robed young man's laughter grew even louder upon hearing this. All of a sudden, Taoist Zai's voice rang out within Han Li's mind. Fellow Taoist Han, I remember who he is. He's the one who severely wounded you all those years ago and sealed your azure bamboo cloud-swarm swords and myself. Han Li's heart jolted slightly upon hearing this, and he hurriedly asked through voice transmission, "Are you sure?" "I'm certain. He possesses a formation of strange abilities, and he seems to be able to seal away one's memories. I was only able to recover some snippets of memories after fusing with this puppet, but I'm confident that this is the man who came after you all those years ago," Taoist Zai replied. Han Li offered no response, but a cold look had appeared in his eyes. "It looks like you've finally remembered something. I've had to spend a great deal of effort looking for you, and I certainly wasn't expecting to find you here," the silver-robed young man said with a faint smile. "It sounds like we're truly tied together by fate," Han Li said in a cold voice. "I don't want to waste any time here. Hand over the secret behind how you're able to produce those time law crystals and I can let you live," the silver-robed young man said. "But I have no plans of letting you live," Han Li retorted with a shake of his head. "It appears that my kindness is being mistaken for weakness. I'm not going to let you get away again this time." The smile on the silver-robed young man's face faded as he spoke, and he abruptly swept a hand through the air to release a streak of black light. As soon as the streak of black light was sent flying through the air, it immediately brightened considerably before abruptly vanishing from the spot. Han Li immediately dodged to his left while also making a hand seal, and 4 azure flying swords emerged from his body amid a flash of azure light. The streak of black light appeared beside Han Li without any warning, but it was kept at bay by one of the flying swords that was revolving around him. A loud clang rang out as Han Li was sent flying back through the air like a cannonball, only managing to just barely steady himself after flying back for several hundred feet. Only then did Han Li catch a clear glimpse of the streak of black light, and it contained a small black hammer that was around a foot in size with profound spirit patterns engraved all over its surface, giving off formidable spiritual power fluctuations. Even though the azure flying sword had managed to ward off the hammer, it was trembling incessantly, clearly having been dealt a heavy blow. Han Li flicked his fingers through the air, and the three other flying swords quickly shot forth to strike the black hammer, sending it flying back amid a string of 3 consecutive resounding clangs. At the same time, Han Li swept both sleeves through the air to release several dozen azure flying swords, then shot back in retreat without any hesitation. These flying swords gathered in front of Han Li alongside the 4 previous flying swords. In the blink of an eye, all 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords were assembled, and they immediately unleashed countless identical streaks of azure sword chi that surged toward Han Li's 3 assailants like a turbulent river, slicing through all of the space in their wake and presenting a formidable sight to behold. The expressions of the 2 black-robed guards changed slightly upon seeing this, while the silver-robed young man merely sneered as he withdrew the small black hammer back up his sleeve, immediately following which a silver bell appeared in his hand, and he shook it gently to produce a crisp chime. Immediately thereafter, waves of silver light erupted from the bell in all directions, instantly encompassing a vast space up ahead. As soon as the river of azure sword chi surged into the waves of silver light, the former immediately began to warp and twist before silently disintegrating, and the formidable stream of sword chi was nullified with ease. Soon, only the 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords remained, but they were also flying around in a chaotic and haphazard fashion, as if they had lost all sense of direction. Han Li's expression remained unchanged upon seeing this, and he immediately made a hand seal, upon which bright golden lightning erupted out of the scattered flying swords amid a resounding thunderclap. As a result, they were able to stabilize themselves within the waves of silver light, following which the arcs of golden lightning erupting out of all of the swords intertwined to form a strange pattern. Immediately thereafter, all of the flying swords abruptly vanished amid a flash of golden light, then re-emerged as 72 streaks of flying sword light amid a resounding thunderclap. Thick arcs of golden lightning sprang forth before connecting with one another to instantly form a lightning formation around the trio, and all of this had taken place in the blink of an eye, so the trio didn't have any time to react before they found themselves inside the lightning formation. A burst of formidable restrictive force spread through the formation, and the trio immediately felt as if they had been plunged into a swamp, and their immortal spiritual power circulation had also become rather sluggish. The 2 black-robed guards were very alarmed, and they immediately conjured up protective light barriers as they attempted to break free from the lightning formation, while the silver-robed young man remained completely still as his gaze roamed over the surrounding azure bamboo cloudswarm swords, and it was unclear what he was thinking. In the next instant, the 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords began to release dazzling radiance as streaks of sword chi that were several times thicker and brighter than before swept toward the trio amid a wave of golden lightning. "Young master!" The pair of black-robed guards yelled urgently in unison at the sight of the oncoming barrage of sword chi and lightning. The silver-robed young man gave a cold harumph, seemingly completely unaffected by the restrictive effects of the lightning formation, then swept a hand through the air to send an incantation seal flying into the bell that he was holding. After that, he shook the bell vigorously, and waves of silver light that were several times denser than before emerged before sweeping through the surrounding area, opening up a silver space that was several hundred feet in size. The pair of black-robed guards immediately regained their mobility, and their immortal spiritual power was able to circulate as normal again as well. But at this point, the barrage of sword chi was already no more than 100 feet away. Right at this moment, the silver-robed young man opened his mouth to release a burst of gray light, which then began to revolve above their heads, releasing a vast expanse of gray light that enveloped all three of them. In the next instant, the formidable wave of sword chi and golden lightning arrived, forming an enormous ball of azure light that instantly inundated the trio. Within the ball of light, streaks of sword and arcs of golden lightning were surging through the air in a frenzy, and everything down below was torn to shreds. Han Li was hovering in midair several thousand feet away from the ball of azure light, holding an immortal origin stone that he was using to quickly replenish his immortal spiritual power. All of a sudden, he raised an eyebrow, and a faint crack rang out from a certain part of the ball of azure light. Immediately thereafter, a burst of gray light tore through the azure sword chi and golden lightning, seemingly completely unaffected, and it erupted out into the open before fading to reveal the silver-robed young man and his two personal guards. A small gray mountain was hovering above them while revolving incessantly, releasing a layer of dense gray light that enveloped all three of them. The pair of black-robed guards were looking a little disheveled, but the silver-robed young man was completely unscathed, and even his robes hadn't been damaged in the slightest. Meanwhile, Han Li cast his gaze toward the small gray mountain as a complex look appeared in his eyes. Even though it was a little different from how it had previously looked, he was still able to identify it as one of the treasures that he had lost, the integrated 5 Extremes Mountain. This acquired immortal treasure of yours was not bad, but the refinement method used was far too crude, and the 5 extreme mountains weren't sufficiently pure either. I had to expend a great deal of time and effort to refine it to this extent, and it's actually the first time that I'm using it in battle. Let's have you, its former owner, get a taste of its power, the silver-robed young man said in a casual voice as he raised a hand, and the gray mountain instantly swelled drastically in size. At the same time, the countless profound spirit patterns engraved upon its surface released a layer of gray light as it crashed heavily down upon the ball of azure light below. Even before the two made contact, the formidable pressure released by the giant mountain was already causing the ball of azure light to ripple and quiver. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he made a hand seal, and he quickly made a hand seal, upon which countless streaks of sword chi immediately converged inward from the surface of the ball of azure light, transforming it into an azure sword lotus flower with thick arcs of lightning flashing over its surface in the blink of an eye. The azure sword lotus flower spun around on the spot while radiating dazzling azure light, releasing countless streaks of azure swordlight toward the giant gray mountain. However, at the same time, a burst of gray light swept forth from the underside of the mountain to meet the azure sword lotus flower. The arcs of golden lightning flashing over the sword lotus flower vanished without a trace within the gray light, following which the sword lotus flower itself crumbled away, reverting back into 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, and the spirit patterns on the surfaces of the swords were flashing erratically. Han Li's brows furrowed even more tightly upon seeing this. He was naturally aware of the integrated 5 Extremes Mountain's ability to suppress the power of lightning, but the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords had absorbed an enormous amount of sword essence and been smelted using a whole host of precious materials, thereby significantly enhancing their power, so he didn't think that it would be so severely affected by the gray light. It seemed that the integrated 5 Extremes Mountain had also become far more formidable after being refined by the silver-robed young man. Even as these thoughts were flashing through his mind, Han Li continued to cycle through a series of hand seals, and azure light erupted from the surfaces of the 72 flying swords once again. At the same time, they released countless azure threads that cleared open an area within the gray light, and before the gray light had a chance to recover, all of the flying swords instantly flew back toward Han Li. You sure have quite a few good treasures on you. This set of flying swords is not bad at all. I wanted to take them last time, but I suppose it's still not too late, the silver-robed young man said with a faint smile as he made a hand seal. All of the runes on the surface of the gray mountain lit up, and waves of gray light that were even denser than before surged forth before spreading downward, immediately enveloping the 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, which still hadn't had a chance to get very far away. The spiritual light glowing from all of the flying swords was flashing and quivering incessantly, and they were like fish trapped in a net. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and he hurriedly switched to a different hand seal. But this time, no matter what he tried, the 72 flying swords were unable to break free. Meanwhile, the silver-robed young man opened his mouth to release a burst of black light, which vanished into the gray mountain in a flash. The waves of gray light being released by the mountain instantly transformed into countless gray runes, which then turned into countless thin gray threads that wrapped themselves around the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, instantly forming a series of gray cocoons. The struggles of the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords gradually grew weaker and weaker, while the gray light around them stabilized once again. The silver-robed young man then opened his mouth a second time to produce a slightly viscous-looking ball of black light, within which countless black runes were flashing, giving off a burst of peculiar law fluctuations. The ball of light then split apart into 72 streaks of black light, each of which fused into an azure bamboo cloud swarm sword in the blink of an eye. The sword chi and lightning being released by the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords were completely unable to keep the black light at bay, and the spiritual light radiating from them instantly took on a slightly black coloration. Han Li knew that in order to recover his swords, he would have to directly attack the silver-robed young man, so that was exactly what he did. The silver-robed young man turned to the oncoming Han Li, only for the portly guard beside him to hurriedly interject. "There's no need for you to personally deal with a mere late-true immortal cultivator, young master. Just leave him to us while you focus on subduing that set of flying swords." They had just been severely humiliated by Han Li's earlier attack, and if they couldn't prove their usefulness to the silver-robed young man, then they were going to be in a very perilous position. The thin black-robed guard also immediately nodded in agreement. "All right, in that case, I'll leave him to you, but don't kill him. I still have some things that I need to find out from him," the silver-robed young man replied with a nod. The pair of black-robed guards were ecstatic, and they immediately flew toward Han Li. Dazzling starlight appeared over the portly guard's body, and his belly abruptly swelled to 3 times its original size, giving him the appearance of a fat toad. Immediately thereafter, he opened his mouth to release a vast expanse of bright starlight, which swept toward Han Li like a resplendent wave. Interspersed throughout the wave of starlight were countless glowing grains of sand that were rumbling like lightning, as if they could explode at any moment. Meanwhile, the thin guard made a rapid string of hand seals, and balls of black flames rose up over his body. Skull projections then emerged within the balls of fire, and they were cackling in a sinister voice as the black fireballs shot forth toward Han Li at the thin guard's behest, transforming into countless harrowing ghostly heads as they flew through the air. The collective cackling of the ghostly heads was like a wave of countless steel needles threatening to surge into the listener's mind. In the face of the pair of oncoming guards, Han Li displayed no intention to take evasive measures. Instead, Bright golden light emerged over his entire body as he flew directly toward the horde of ghostly heads. The portly guard let loose a loud roar as he swept his sleeves through the air, and all of the starry sand converged toward Han Li before exploding violently into huge balls of lightning that inundated the entire sky, presenting a formidable sight to behold. At the same time, the thin guard pointed a finger in Han Li's direction, and all of the ghostly heads in the sky abruptly swelled drastically in size before opening their mouths to send bursts of black light hurtling directly toward Han Li. The black light didn't appear to have been all that remarkable, but they were giving off an extremely corrosive aura, and the space in their wake was rippling incessantly, as if the streaks of light were capable of corroding the very air itself. The golden light radiating from Han Li's body brightened, and he suddenly transformed into a golden blur, accelerating drastically as he flew directly into the oncoming attacks. Not only had he become extraordinarily fast, he was also displaying immaculate bodily control, weaving back and forth through the lightning and black light, and he was always able to just barely squeeze through right before his body was inundated by the oncoming attacks. This was all thanks to his reversal true axis ability, and the pair of guards hurriedly released their spiritual sense in an attempt to track down Han Li's location, but they were completely unable to keep up with his speed, and it was often the case that as soon as they spotted Han Li, he would already be gone. The surrounding lightning and black light were all extremely fast and formidable attacks, but he was making them appear downright slow and sluggish, and the pair of guards were astonished to see this. Before they had a chance to do anything, Han Li had already passed through the vast expanse of lightning and black light, then appeared no more than 1,000 feet in front of them in a wraith-like manner. At this point, the dazzling golden light radiating from his body had already faded, and only now did the pair of guards manage to react, flying back in retreat with astonishment in their eyes. However, as late true immortal cultivators, they possessed a vast wealth of battle experience, and they immediately devised strategies to counteract Han Li. The portly guard opened his mouth to release a pair of triangular shields that revolved around him briefly before transforming into a thick light barrier, and at the same time, all of the starlight in the sky transformed into countless starlight rings that swept toward Han Li. Meanwhile, the thin guard was chanting an incantation, and a string of loud cracks were ringing out from within his body as he rapidly swelled in size while his skin and flesh quickly peeled away, turning him into a massive black skeleton that was over 100 feet tall in the blink of an eye. The black skeleton was giving off an enormous aura that was close to twice as formidable as before, and red light was flashing within its eye sockets as it spread open its huge hands. Its fingers resembled giant black swords with black flames surging around them, and it reached out to make a grab for Han Li's head. It was clear from their immaculate teamwork that these two had been fighting alongside one another for a long time, and weren't giving Han Li any opportunity to strike. However, right at this moment, dazzling golden light erupted out of Han Li's body again, and a golden wheel appeared behind him before rapidly revolving on the spot. A layer of golden ripples then surged forth from his body, instantly encompassing the entire surrounding area in a radius of around 10,000 feet. The two guards were also caught within the golden ripples, and their movements immediately became very slow and sluggish. Additionally, the starlight rings that were falling out of the sky had also come to a complete standstill, as if they had been frozen in place. In truth, it wasn't entirely accurate to say that they had been completely stopped in their tracks. Instead, they had actually been slowed down to an extreme extent, to the point that it looked no different from coming to a complete stop. He's using the laws of time. The silver-robed young man's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and he immediately flew toward the pair of black-robed guards, leaving the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords behind as he did so. Meanwhile, Han Li had already transformed into a giant golden ape that was over 1,000 feet tall, and there were silver patterns all over his massive fists as he swung them viciously at the pair of guards. In response, the two guards remained completely still, as if they were oblivious to the oncoming attack. The light barrier around the portly guard's body was completely pulverized by a burst of tremendous force, and the giant fist wasn't slowed down in the slightest as it crashed into his body. At the same time, the other fist struck the black skeleton that the thin guard had transformed into, and right after the two guards were struck by Han Li's fists. All of the golden ripples in the air receded as the flow of time reverted back to its original speed. The portly guard's body instantly exploded into countless scraps of mangled flesh, while the black skeleton was also shattered into countless bone shards. Their two souls had also been restricted by the mantra-treasured axis, rendering them completely unable to react, so they were also destroyed alongside their bodies. All of this had taken place in the blink of an eye, and the silver-robed young man had only just arrived in the sky above the giant ape with a furious look on his face. Never had he imagined that Han Li would be able to slay a pair of late true immortal cultivators in such devastating fashion in such a brief span of time. The silver-robed young man swept a hand through the air, and a streak of black light flew toward him, containing a black sword that was similar in shape to a beastly fang. The sword was riddled with countless black runes that were giving off law fluctuations, and it swelled to around 1,000 feet in size in the blink of an eye, following which a black worm projection appeared around it as it slashed down upon the giant ape. All of a sudden, the mantra-treasured axis behind the giant ape began to spin in reverse before vanishing into its body in a flash. In the next instant, the giant ape abruptly vanished from the spot, and the huge black sword struck nothing but empty air. A trail of golden afterimages appeared in the air, as the giant ape flew toward the integrated 5 Extremes mountain in the distance at an incredible speed. The silver-robed young man's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and he hurriedly flew back as quickly as he could, but he was still far from being able to match the golden ape's speed. By the time the giant ape arrived in front of the integrated 5 Extremes mountain, the silver-robed young man was only halfway there. The golden ape immediately opened its mouth to release a ball of blood essence, which was instantly ignited into a burst of crimson flames, with countless crimson runes dancing within it, as it hurtled toward the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords. The streak of crimson fire was able to pass through the gray light and gray cocoons without any inhibition, before vanishing into the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, which immediately began to glow with bright azure light again. At the same time, they were able to tear through the gray cocoons around them, but it seemed that they still weren't going to be able to break free from the gray light anytime soon. The silver-robed young man was furious to see this, and he was just about to make a hand seal when the giant ape suddenly turned around with bright golden light radiating from its fists, and its arms flashed through the air in a blur as it unleashed a barrage of countless fist projections. The barrage of golden fist projections swept toward the silver-robed young man with tremendous force, and even before they descended upon him, a burst of tremendous force had already encompassed the entire space within a radius of about half a kilometer around him, causing him to slow down involuntarily. The silver-robed young man was unable to evade the attack, so he could only sweep a sleeve through the air to release a black shield, which transformed into a black light barrier in front of him. Countless fist projections crashed into the black light barrier, one after another before exploding violently, but the light barrier remained completely unmoved. However, the silver-robed young man was also temporarily kept at bay. Golden light flashed over the giant ape's entire body, and a second pair of arms abruptly emerged from its ribs amid a flash of golden light before quickly making a hand seal. The 72 flying swords glowed even brighter as they fused as one to form a single giant azure sword, with thick arcs of golden lightning flashing over its surface amid rumbling thunderclaps. The giant azure sword began to shudder violently, then transformed into a streak of azure swordlight that was over 1,000 feet in length before slashing viciously against the surrounding gray light. A peerlessly sharp aura erupted out of the streak of azure swordlight, causing all of the space in its wake to twist and warp incessantly. A gash was finally torn into the surrounding gray light, and the streak of azure swordlight instantly shot out from within before returning to the giant ape's side, where it reverted back into a giant azure sword. Immediately thereafter, the giant ape's body blurred, and it vanished from the spot along with the giant sword. In the next instant, Han Li re-emerged over 10,000 feet away with arcs of lightning flashing over his entire body, and the giant azure sword was also present beside him, but it had shrunk down to no more than 10 feet in length. Han Li opened his mouth to release a ball of blood essence into the azure sword, and it immediately began to glow a shade of azure that was so bright that its radiance rivaled that of the sun. The remaining black coloration on the sword was instantly erased, and it let loose an elated ringing sound. Meanwhile, the silver-robed young man remained still on the spot, watching Han Li with a dark expression as he made a beckoning motion to draw the integrated 5 extremes mountain back to himself. The two stood in midair while looking back at one another, and neither of them was in any hurry to attack. A short while later, the silver-robed young man broke the silence. "Looks like I really did underestimate you." Han Li paid no heed to him, as he began to make a rapid string of hand seals. The giant azure sword beside him split back up into 72 small swords, then circled around him momentarily, before transforming into an azure sword formation beneath him. "I was going to take my time and play around with you a little, but it seems like you're more of a pain to deal with than I expected. In that case, I'll just crush you now, then slowly torture your soul," the silver-robed harumphed coldly. As soon as his voice trailed off, he swept a sleeve through the air to release a streak of black light, which transformed into a black inkstone treasure. The inkstone was very antiquated in appearance, and as soon as it appeared, countless tiny golden runes immediately surged out of it in a frenzy. At the same time, it was giving off a burst of peculiar law fluctuations. The silver-robed young man's aura also began to swell, and the enormous spiritual pressure that was emanating from his body was causing the nearby space to warp and shudder. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly upon seeing this. The silver-robed young man was finally displaying his full cultivation base, and just as Han Li anticipated, he was a golden, immortal cultivator. However, his aura was still far inferior to the likes of Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai, and it was rather unstable, indicating that he had only recently progressed to the golden immortal stage and hadn't had a chance to consolidate his cultivation base yet. Even so, he was still a golden immortal cultivator, which was incomparable relative to a late true immortal cultivator. The silver-robed young man began to chant an incantation, and a dense stream of runes surged out of his mouth, then swept toward the black inkstone hovering in the air in front of him before vanishing into it in a flash. The inkstone immediately began to swell drastically, quickly expanding to over 100 feet in size, and all of the scenery and creatures engraved on its surface took on an extremely lifelike quality. For some reason, a hint of foreboding welled up in Han Li's heart upon seeing this. The silver-robed young man switched to a different hand seal before flicking his fingers consecutively through the air, and the giant black inkstone began to revolve on the spot, while releasing a vast expanse of black chi that resembled a puddle of black ink that was swirling around in the air above the inkstone. The black chi quickly formed a dark cloud that was around 1,000 feet in size, and it encompassed both the silver-robed young man and the integrated Five Extremes mountain, while continuing to rapidly expand. Hanli faltered slightly upon seeing this, following which his eyes narrowed slightly as he shot back in retreat without any hesitation, while sweeping his spiritual sense through the surrounding area. However, as soon as his spiritual sense entered the dark cloud, he discovered that it was like a vast expanse of nothingness that he couldn't detect anything from. Upon making this observation, he immediately raised a hand before pointing a finger forward, and the azure bamboo cloud-swarm swords around him immediately began to glow brightly before quickly forming an azure sword lotus flower around him. The lotus flower began to rapidly revolve while releasing countless streaks of azure sword chi, which swept toward the black cloud with tremendous might. Countless streaks of sword chi tore through the black cloud as balls of azure and golden lightning exploded incessantly, tearing countless holes through the cloud and threatening to scatter it altogether. However, the black cloud was still constantly expanding, and the holes that had been torn into its surface were quickly filled again, leaving the cloud completely unscathed. It seemed that the formidable storm of sword chi hadn't affected the black cloud at all, and it was as if the silver-robed young man inside had vanished into thin air. Hanli's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he was just about to do something else when the black cloud finally ceased in its expansion. It then began to churn violently while releasing countless black runes that converged toward the center, forming a black ball the size of a house in the blink of an eye. Hanli observed the scene unfolding before him for a moment, then swept a hand through the air, and the azure sword lotus flower in front of him swelled in size, while its petals formed several azure light barriers before him. All of a sudden, the black ball shuddered, and a red line suddenly appeared on its surface before splitting apart in either direction to reveal a massive vertical eye. The eye was a pristine white color with an inky black pupil, and it appeared to have been no different from an ordinary eye, but it was giving off a peculiar aura, and as soon as its gaze turned to settle upon Han Li, the sense of foreboding in his heart instantly became compounded even further. He reflexively rushed away to the side, not willing to be under the direct scrutiny of the giant eye, but the eye was able to track his movements, and its gaze remained firmly fixed upon him. Han Li was quite alarmed to see this. An azure light emerged over his body alongside arcs of golden lightning as he rapidly flew through the air while constantly changing directions. Yet no matter what he did, the giant eye continued to track him without fail. Furthermore, white light was beginning to gather at the center of the eye's pupil, and it seemed to have been preparing something. All of a sudden, Han Li harumphed coldly as he withdrew the azure sword lotus flower in front of him, then flew directly toward the black cloud above the giant eye as a streak of azure light, plunging into the cloud in the blink of an eye. As soon as he plunged into the dark cloud, Han Li immediately felt his surroundings go dark. He swept a sleeve through the air to release a large body of black liquid, and it was none other than the heavy water that he had accumulated over the past years. The heavy water circled around him once, instantly forming a massive black spherical barrier that encompassed the entire space within a radius of 100 feet around him to keep the black mist at bay. After doing all of that, he swept his gaze across his surroundings with blue light flashing in his eyes, but all he could see were layers upon layers of dark clouds, and even with his bright sight spirit eyes, visibility was limited to no more than 1,000 feet. Furthermore, his spiritual sense remained severely restricted, and he was barely able to release it out of his body at all. His brows furrowed slightly as he slowly flew forward with the heavy water barrier around him, and as he did so, he was doing everything in his power to find the silver-robed young man. However, even after flying for a long while, his surroundings were still filled with nothing but dark clouds. Furthermore, the cloud didn't appear to have been all that big from the outside, but after entering it, he felt as if he had entered a boundless, independent space. Moments later, Han Li drew to a halt, then inspected his surroundings momentarily before abruptly sweeping a hand forward through the air. A dull thump rang out as a thick streak of azure sword chi that was over 1,000 feet in length shot forth before plunging into the black cloud up ahead, instantly piercing through it to open up a passageway that was several thousand feet long. However, in the next instant, the surrounding black clouds quickly converged from all sides, and the hole was instantly filled again. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he swept a sleeve through the air, and the 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords were released once again, before fusing as one into a single giant azure sword that was several thousand feet in length. The sword was giving off radiant azure light and incredibly thick arcs of golden lightning, and it was so bright that it was blinding to look at. A large area was instantly torn into the nearby dark cloud, and Han Li made a hand seal, upon which the giant sword beside him began to glow even more radiantly as it slashed viciously through the space up ahead. The black cloud up ahead churned violently as a massive gash was sliced into it, and the sword strike was so formidable that it had almost sliced the entire black cloud into two. The entire space that Han Li was situated in began to tremble violently, yet aside from that, there was no other change, and a few moments later, everything reverted back to its original state, as if that sword strike had never been unleashed at all. Han Li's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this, but right at this moment, a voice suddenly rang out. "I didn't think you would rush in here. That's come as quite a surprise, but don't think that this will allow you to avoid my soul-destroying true light." The voice belonged to none other than the silver-robed young man, and as soon as his voice trailed off, a burst of dazzling white light abruptly appeared in the black cloud up ahead before hurtling rapidly toward Han Li. Han Li remained still on the spot as the giant azure sword in front of him split up into 72 small swords once again, then came together to form an azure sword lotus flower that began to revolve above his head. At the same time, the surface of the heavy water protective barrier around him also began to flash and ripple incessantly. In the blink of an eye, the burst of white light reached no more than several thousand feet away from Han Li before drawing to a halt, revealing itself to have been the same black inkstone from before, except it had become semi-transparent. The silver-robed young man stood behind the inkstone with his hands clasped behind his back and a cold smile on his face. "I thought you were too much of a coward to come out," Han Li said with a cold smile as he took a glance at the huge inkstone. A hint of fury flashed through the silver-robed young man's face upon hearing this, and he harumphed in a cold voice, "If you're so eager to die, then let me grant you your wish." The giant inkstone began to revolve on the spot, while giving off rays of dazzling light that were as bright as the sun. Countless white runes emerged, giving off extremely formidable law fluctuations, and a projection of a giant eye appeared before casting its gaze toward Han Li, just like what had happened outside the black cloud. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he immediately dodged to the side. However, right at this moment, the black cloud above him suddenly began to churn before abruptly splitting apart, and the integrated 5 Extremes mountain emerged without any warning. Countless gray runes were swirling around the mountain, giving off dazzling gray light. A thick pillar of gray light abruptly came crashing down from the heavens, forming a massive gray space that enveloped Han Li's entire body in the blink of an eye. Enshrouded within the gray light, the spiritual light emanating from the 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords immediately dimmed. Han Li also felt an immense constrictive force around his body, locking him firmly in place and preventing him from moving. He let loose a low roar, and bright azure light erupted from his body as he struggled with all his might. But the gray light remained completely resolute, and there was some type of law power surging within it, preventing him from breaking free. Right at this moment, the giant inkstone up ahead revolved on the spot, following which a thick pillar of white light shot out of the huge eye, hurtling directly toward Han Li. Even before the pillar of white light arrived, Han Li was struck by a burst of sharp pain directly in his soul, and he felt as if many of his memories were about to be extracted. Thankfully, his enormous spiritual sense was activated on its own, and the disturbance in his soul was quickly quelled. Even so, he was still quite alarmed by this turn of events, and the heavy water barrier around him immediately converged to form a wall of heavy water in front of him at his behest, shielding him from the white light. However, the white light was able to easily pass through the wall of heavy water, and it was completely unobstructed. In this dire situation, Han Li immediately opened his mouth to release his heavy water true axis, which began to rapidly revolve while drastically expanding in size. A vast expanse of watery light that was interspersed with countless black runes emerged from the axis to form a barrier in front of him, and the heavy water true axis was able to keep the white light at bay. However, the white light was able to quickly seep through the watery light barrier released by the heavy water true axis, passing through it after just a few seconds. However, with this brief window of respite, Han Li was able to catch his breath, and he began to chant an incantation. Bright golden light radiated from his body as his mantra-treasured axis appeared behind him, before releasing a vast expanse of golden ripples that gave off formidable time. Law fluctuations swept forth in all directions. Perhaps it was due to the surrounding black cloud, but the golden ripples weren't able to spread any further than 1,000 feet. In the next instant, the pillar of white light entered the area encompassed within the golden ripples, and it immediately came to an abrupt halt. However, if one were to look closely, they would discover that the pillar of white light was still approaching Han Li, except it had been slowed down by an extreme degree. The silver-robed young man's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this, and he gave a cold harumph before beginning to chant an incantation, while casting several incantation seals at the integrated 5 extremes mountain from afar. All of the countless runes on the surface of the mountain instantly lit up, and the gray light that it was radiating brightened significantly, while countless gray runes surged forth before fusing into the gray area down below. The gray space was instantly significantly bolstered, thereby further amplifying the restrictive force acting upon Han Li's body. A series of gray ripples appeared, giving off incredibly formidable law powers to compress against the golden ripples around Han Li, and the two opposing forces clashed together like powerful waves. The golden ripples shuddered momentarily before shrinking even further, and the pillar of white light was able to draw closer and closer to Han Li again. 900 feet. 800 feet. 700 feet. Under the pressure exerted by the gray light emanating from the integrated 5 extremes mountain, the golden ripples being released by the mantra-treasured axis were constantly being compressed, while the pillar of white light began to steadily accelerate. At this rate, it wasn't going to take much longer before the pillar of white light broke through the shackles of time to reach Han Li. Large droplets of sweat began to bead up on Han Li's forehead, and he could clearly sense the sharp pain in his soul being exacerbated as the white light approached him. His expression had darkened significantly, and he was constantly injecting more immortal spiritual power into his mantra-treasured axis, but that was only slightly slowing down the rate at which the golden ripples were being compressed. A pleased look appeared in the silver-robed young man's eyes upon seeing this, and he opened his mouth to release a ball of black light, within which countless black runes were dancing incessantly. He quickly made a hand seal, and the ball of black light split up into two parts, one of which fused into the giant inkstone, while the other vanished into the integrated 5 extremes mountain. The inkstone and the integrated 5 extremes mountain immediately began to glow even brighter, while the gray space around Han Li had virtually taken on a substantial form. Countless waves of gray ripples were surging forth incessantly to further compress the golden ripples around Han Li, forcing it down to a radius of less than 500 feet. The pillar of white light grew even brighter, and countless white runes were dancing around within it. It seemed as if it were about to break free from the golden ripples, and the golden ripples immediately around it were illuminated white, as the pillar of white light continued to close in on Han Li at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye. Han Li's complexion began to pale, and despite his best efforts, the golden ripples around him were constantly being shrunk down by the surrounding gray light. At this point, the pillar of white light was already no more than 200 feet away from him. The silver-robed young man could already taste his imminent victory, and he made a hand seal once again, upon which another burst of black light emerged from his body. Right at this moment, a resounding boom rang out behind him, and a golden crab pincer projection the size of a house emerged. The projection was enveloped in countless arcs of golden lightning, and giving off formidable law power fluctuations as it hurtled toward the silver-robed young man at an incredible speed. The silver-robed young man's expression changed drastically as he hurriedly switched to a different hand seal, and a suit of armor instantly appeared over his body amid a flash of black light. The suit of armor was of a purplish-black color, and its helmet had been crafted in the shape of a dragon's head, while several spikes could be seen on the knee and shoulder joints. The entire suit of armor was also riddled with black patterns and giving off immense baleful chi. The golden crab pincer struck the suit of purplish-black armor with an earth-shattering boom, and the silver-robed young man was sent flying, while a series of shallow cracks had also appeared on the surface of the suit of armor. Even with the suit of armor acting as a buffer, a burst of tremendous force was still transferred into the silver-robed young man's body, churning up his internal organs and causing him to throw up a mouthful of blood. After he was sent flying, the giant inkstone lost its source of immortal spiritual power, and it finally fizzled out no more than 100 feet away from Han Li. The integrated 5 extremes mountain was still hovering above Han Li's head, but the gray light that it was projecting downward had also become rather unstable. The gray space around Han Li also rippled slightly, and the restrictive force that it was exerting was significantly diminished. He immediately pounced on this opportunity, releasing several balls of light out of his body that transformed into a series of true spirit projections. The projections circled around him momentarily before vanishing into his body, and a layer of purplish-golden light surfaced over his skin as his body swelled drastically, transforming into a purplish-golden giant with 3 heads and 6 arms. At the same time, countless golden scales and silver spirit patterns appeared over his skin, and 7 specks of dazzling starlight also emerged on his lower abdomen. An enormous aura then erupted out of his body, causing the surrounding gray space to shudder violently. The purplish-golden giant made a grabbing motion with one hand, and a huge azure sword appeared in its grasp before being swung down viciously. An enormous crescent-shaped streak of azure swordlight swept through the air, with thick arcs of golden lightning surging around it, before crashing into the gray light barrier. A resounding crack rang out, and this time, a gash was torn into the gray space, revealing the outside world. The purplish-golden giant immediately flew out through that opening at an incredible speed, following which a vertical black split open on his glabella. A pillar of translucent light shot out of the vertical eye, then transformed into an indistinct sword that vanished without a trace in a flash. In the next instant, The sword appeared behind the silver-robed young man's head without any warning before plunging directly forward. Even though the silver-robed young man had been injured by the previous blow, his reactions remained quite sharp, and he hurriedly swept a hand through the air to conjure up a black palm projection that grabbed toward the translucent sword. However, in the instant that the black palm projection closed itself around the sword, the latter abruptly vanished. The silver-robed young man faltered slightly upon seeing this, and before he had a chance to figure out what had happened, the translucent sword reappeared in his mind before slashing viciously down upon his soul. Arg! The silver-robed young man let loose a blood-curdling howl as he threw his hands onto his own head. Right at this moment, Taoist Zhao appeared beside the silver-robed young man before spreading its hands open, and a pair of enormous balls of golden lightning appeared before it, both of which were as massive as mountains. Thick arcs of golden lightning were flashing incessantly over their surfaces, presenting a formidable sight to behold. Furthermore, the balls of lightning were releasing countless golden lightning runes, each of which was the size of a table and giving off fierce law fluctuations. Taoist Zhao then joined its palms together, and the two massive balls of lightning fused as one, before transforming into a gargantuan golden lightning sword amid a rumbling thunderclap. Golden halos were proliferating in all directions from the giant sword, and all of the surrounding black mist was instantly scattered. The entire surrounding space in a radius of several dozen kilometers began to buzz audibly, and countless five-colored balls of light formed by the world's origin chi emerged before converging toward the giant sword in a frenzy. Five-colored light was also surging over the surface of the giant lightning sword, causing the nearby space to ripple and quiver. All of a sudden, the entirety of heaven and earth had taken on a completely different complexion, and before the silver-robed young man had a chance to react, the giant sword had already crashed down upon him. Countless cracks appeared on his suit of purplish-black armor before it exploded amid a resounding boom, and his body was also inundated by a vast expanse of lightning before exploding into countless pieces. Nearby, Han Li had already reverted back to his original form, and he heaved a faint sigh of relief upon seeing this. Right at this moment, a tiny burst of black light emerged from the silver-robed young man's torn-up remains, and it immediately vanished into thin air. Blue light flashed within Han Li's eyes upon seeing this, and a beam of black light shot out of the vertical eye on his glabella, striking a certain spot in the air in a flash before vanishing into it. A dull thump rang out as that patch of space shuddered, following which a vast expanse of black light emerged, and a tiny black figure that was only several inches tall stumbled out into the open. This was none other than the silver-robed young man's nascent soul, and even though it had been forcibly revealed by Han Li's law destruction eye, it hadn't sustained any injuries. However, there was a furious look on its face, and it was just about to make a hand seal when a burst of spatial fluctuations erupted out of the nearby area, following which a translucent chain shot out before wrapping itself around the nascent soul like lightning. The entire chain was giving off translucent silver light, and it had a rather insubstantial appearance. An alarmed look appeared on the nascent soul's face, and it struggled with all its might to break free, but the chain remained as resolute as ever. In the next instant, Han Li and Taoist Zhao appeared right beside the nascent soul, and the latter was holding a pair of treasures in its hands, namely the black inkstone and the integrated 5 Extremes mountain. Without the support of the silver-robed young man's immortal spiritual power, Taoist Zhao was able to seize these two treasures with ease. The nascent soul seemed to know that it wouldn't have been able to escape no matter what, and it took a glance at Han Li before turning its gaze to Taoist Zhao. "I didn't think that you would have such a trump card up your sleeve. And this chain, if I'm not mistaken, this is a spiritual sense chain, So you must have cultivated some type of forbidden technique, right? The nascent soul asked in a calm voice. Hanli paid no heed to the nascent soul as he swept a hand through the air to release a burst of azure light, which swept downward before retrieving a pair of storage treasures, the very same ones that the pair of black-robed guards had been carrying. After that, he released a burst of crimson flames to sweep up silver-robed young man's remains, and after his body had been completely incinerated, the crimson flames surged back, carrying a black ring with it. Hanli stowed these items away in an unhurried manner, then turned to Nascent Soul as he asked, "Who are you, and why have you repeatedly come after me? If you give me a satisfactory answer, I can grant you a quick and painless death. If you're going to kill me, then do it. I'm not going to answer any of your questions," the Nascent Soul replied with a cold smile. Hanli didn't say anything further as he reached out with one hand to grab onto the Nascent Soul's head, and a burst of black light erupted out of his hand, enveloping the Nascent Soul before attempting to infiltrate its body. The Nascent Soul's face instantly became twisted with pain, but a mocking sneer appeared in its eyes as it spat through gritted teeth. "To think that a mere true immortal like you would attempt to search a golden immortal soul. What a joke!" Hanli paid no heed to the Nascent Soul's mockery as he continued to unleash his soul search technique with all his might. Waves of black light surged out of the palm of his hand to envelop the Nascent Soul, but sure enough, his efforts proved to be futile. "It's no use, fellow Taoist Han. There is an evolution in one's nascent soul from the true immortal stage to the golden immortal stage, so there's no way you'll be able to search his soul. As for me, I'm just a puppet, so I can't use any soul search technique either," Taoist Zai said. Hanli slowly released the nascent soul upon hearing this. The nascent soul heaved a sigh of relief, following which a cold sneer appeared on its face as he said, "If you dare to kill me, then Zhao Jinhan will hunt you down no matter where you go. If you let me go, I can swear a soul vow to settle our differences, and on top of that, I can give you some compensation as well." "I don't recall ever saying that I plan to let you live," Hanli said in an indifferent voice. Before the nascent soul had a chance to reply, Hanli opened his mouth to release a burst of silver fire, which instantly enveloped the nascent soul, and it was none other than Hanli's flame of essence. The nascent soul immediately began to howl in agony within the silver flames, but not only was it not displaying any sign of being incinerated, it was no exaggeration to say that its aura hadn't even abated in the slightest. In a very uncommon turn of events, it seemed that the flame of essence was completely ineffective on the nascent soul. Hanli's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and the silver flames immediately began to swirl around the nascent soul as a tiny fiery vortex at his behest, giving off heat that was several times more intense than before. "Hanli, the heavenly court won't let you get away with this," the nascent soul howled, and it had taken on a slightly transparent quality within the fiery vortex. However, the flame of essence was unable to affect the nascent soul any further beyond that. After a brief moment of contemplation, Hanli flicked a finger through the air, releasing a streak of azure sword chi that struck the nascent soul in a flash. A loud thump rang out as the streak of sword chi exploded, and a faint mark appeared on the nascent soul from its head to its abdomen, but the mark quickly vanished without a trace. A hint of surprise flashed through Hanli's eyes upon seeing this. "Fellow Taoist Han, the nascent souls of golden immortal cultivators are extremely resolute and are fundamentally different from true immortal stage nascent souls. At this rate, it's going to take at least several years for you to completely destroy it. This battle hasn't gone on for very long, but there's no guarantee that the people at the White Jade Peak haven't noticed his absence," Taoist Zai said. "What do you suggest I do with this nascent soul then, Brother Zai? If I just let it go free, there will be no end to the troubles to come," Hanli said as his brows furrowed slightly. Golden immortal stage nascent souls are quite difficult to destroy, but only for a true immortal. With my current golden immortal stage power, I can destroy this nascent soul for you, as long as you're willing to spend the required immortal origin stones, Taoist Zai replied. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up slightly upon hearing this. Go ahead, brother Zai, I'm willing to spend the immortal origin stones. Taoist Zai nodded in response, then opened his mouth to release a vast expanse of golden lightning, which intertwined briefly in the air to form a dense net of lightning that ensnared the nascent soul. Arcs of lightning were flashing incessantly over the surface of the lightning net, and it was giving off an astonishingly formidable aura, forming a golden and silver ball of light as it intertwined with the flame of essence. The sound of crackling rang out incessantly as the nascent soul began to spasm violently, and it was becoming transparent at a rate that was discernible even to the naked eye. Around 15 minutes later, Taoist Zai made a hand seal, and all of the arcs of golden lightning faded to reveal a nascent soul that was enveloped in silver flames. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, but then unfurrowed just as quickly. The body of the nascent soul still remained, but it had already turned completely transparent with only faint traces of golden light left on its surface. Its eyes were completely lifeless, and the spiritual fluctuations that it was giving off were extremely feeble, so it was clear that the spiritual power within it had already been completely destroyed, leaving nothing more than an empty husk behind. Why didn't you destroy this nascent soul altogether, brother Zai? Surely you still have some immortal origin stones left over from the 500 that I gave you, Han Li asked. I have no intention of saving immortal origin stones for you. It's just that I suddenly recalled that golden immortal stage nascent souls are a primary ingredient for refining a pill known as the golden soul pill, so it would be a waste to destroy it. At this point, even if there had been any restrictions planted in the nascent soul, they would have already been completely refined, so you don't have to worry about keeping it by your side, Taoist Zai explained. What does this golden soul pill do? Han Li asked. I'm not sure. Recently, I've been recollecting tidbits of memories, and one of those contained information about the golden soul pill. It seems to be quite a rare type of pill, and I'll tell you what it does if I manage to recall, Taoist Zai replied. All right, Han Li replied with a nod, then withdrew his spiritual sense chain. After that, he pulled out a jade box and placed the nascent soul inside it, then adhered a few sealing talismans to the box before stowing it away. Congratulations on recovering a lost treasure, fellow Taoist Han. This treasure here is also quite a formidable one, Taoist Zai said as it handed over the integrated 5 extremes mountain and black inkstone that it was holding. Han Li accepted the pair of treasures, and an excited gleam appeared in his eyes as his gaze first settled upon the black inkstone. This was most definitely an acquired immortal treasure of a very high caliber, and the soul-destroying true light that it was capable of releasing appeared to have contained some type of law power that could directly harm one's soul. This treasure was most likely the culprit behind his amnesia and subsequent descent into the spirit domain realm. Aside from that, the black cloud space that it carried was also quite a good trapping device. However, he had no time to inspect this treasure on an in-depth level for now, and he turned his gaze to the integrated 5 extremes mountain. He had refined this treasure in preparation for his ascension tribulation transcendence, and he had invested immeasurable time, effort, and resources into the treasure's creation. Now that he had recovered it, he couldn't help but feel a little sentimental. Just as the silver-robed young man had declared, the current integrated 5 extremes mountain was already far different from what it had once been. Its basis was still the 5 mountains, but each mountain had been infused with many types of spirit materials, and it had also been refined using a more advanced method. Just the thought of the restrictive ability unleashed by the silver-robed young man using this treasure was enough to get Han Li rather excited. However, time was of the essence right now, so he didn't have time to closely inspect the pair of treasures, and he quickly stowed them away. We should get away from here as soon as possible, fellow Taoist Han. We need to leave before the battle at the White Jade Peak comes to an end, Taoist Zhao warned. I want to get out of here as well, but this restriction is quite formidable and not so easy to break through. Do you have any ways to bypass it? Han Li asked with a wry smile. Taoist Zhao flew over to the wall of yellow mist as he spoke, and he inspected it briefly before suddenly pressing a palm flag against it, following which a layer of yellow light appeared over his hand. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this, following which a hint of intrigue appeared in his eyes. Ever since it had fully integrated itself with this puppet, Taoist Zhao had become much more lifelike and bore a much closer resemblance to an actual living cultivator. Moments later, Taoist Zhao withdrew its palm and Han Li asked, "What do you think?" This is a very profound restriction with many interconnected layers. Whoever set up this restriction has to be an exceptional master, Taoist Zhao mused. Is there a way to break through it? Han Li asked. There is, but it's going to require a large sum of immortal origin stones to activate one of this immortal puppet's abilities, Taoist Zhao replied. How many will you need? Han Li asked. In addition to what I have left, I'll need about 300 more, Taoist Zhao replied. Han Li was rather taken aback to hear this, and a wry smile appeared on his face as he said, "That's fine, just do what you need to do." In order to lure in the silver-robed young man so that Taoist Zhao could attack him, he had already placed around 600 to 700 immortal origin stones into Taoist Zhai's body, and now that he was having to spend 300 more immortal origin stones, that was already close to a third of his entire wealth. It seemed that he had to be sparing in his reliance on Taoist Zhao unless it was absolutely necessary. He was still hoping to be able to purchase some Tao pill ingredients using his immortal origin stones, and that was going to be a significant expenditure. With that in mind, he flipped a hand over to produce a storage pouch, which he tossed at Taoist Zhao. Taoist Zhao wasted no time in pulling all of the immortal origin stones out of the storage pouch before directly swallowing them, then said, "I'll also require the assistance of your Tao warriors." Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this, but he duly obliged, handing over his Tao warrior gourd to Taoist Zhao. Taoist Zhao made a hand seal, and a burst of bright yellow light immediately emerged at the opening of the gourd, following which a series of dark yellow beans came falling out like rain. Before long, several hundred Tao warriors' beans had been tipped out, and Taoist Zhao began to chant an incantation, upon which the patterns on the surface of the beans lit up in unison. The beans began to give off a bright yellow glow, but instead of transforming into Tao warriors, they expanded slightly before slowly elongating to form what appeared to have been a series of yellow wooden rods. Bright yellow light was radiating from these wooden rods, and they connected together to form a seemingly haphazard formation, but in reality, it was far more profound than it seemed. Han Li was quite intrigued to see this. It wasn't a rare occurrence for Tao warriors to be used to set up formations, but Han Li had never seen anyone use Tao warriors as formation flags as Taoist Zhao was doing here, and he couldn't help but wonder if this method of Tao warrior usage was something that Taoist Zhao had recently recalled. As Taoist Zhao continued to chant its incantation, it released a series of incantation seals out of its hands, every single one of which fell upon the wooden rods with unerring accuracy. All of the hundreds of wooden rods shuddered in unison, and countless translucent yellow threads rose up from them before intertwining to form a yellow formation. Immediately thereafter, Taoist Zhao thrust both palms forward, and all of the wooden rods instantly flew into the wall of yellow mist, which began to churn and produce a layer of yellow light to obstruct the wooden rods. Taoist Zai was making a rapid string of hand seals, and countless bursts of yellow light were rapidly circulating throughout the yellow formation, forcibly nullifying the yellow light being released by the wall of mist as the wooden rods slowly progressed forward. The section of the wall of mist that was encompassed within the yellow formation began to rapidly dissipate, creating a huge indentation. As the yellow mist scattered, a translucent light barrier with lights of different colors surging over its surface was revealed, and it appeared to have been another profound restriction. Hanli gave a slight nod at the sight of the formation, while Taoist Zai sat down with its legs crossed as it continued to chant its incantation. All of a sudden, thick arcs of golden lightning emerged over its body, giving off bursts of violent law fluctuations that proliferated in all directions. All of the world's origin chi, in a radius of thousands of kilometers, was stirred up, forming balls of purple light that converged toward Taoist Zai. A series of dark clouds emerged, and they quickly came together to obscure the entire sky. Arcs of lightning could be seen occasionally flashing within the clouds amid deafening thunderclaps, and boundless lightning attribute spiritual chi was converging from all directions before fusing into the clouds. Taoist Zai made a hand seal as it chanted an incantation, and lightning was flashing over its body before spreading outward to form an enormous lightning formation that was several dozen acres in area. The lightning formation was rather peculiar in that it was very thin and long, and there were countless lightning runes drifting through the air within it. All of a sudden, Taoist Zai opened its eyes before casting an incantation seal up toward the heavens, and bolts of lightning began to crash down from the clouds. All of the lightning was injected into the lightning formation around Taoist Zai, causing it to glow radiantly, while giving off bursts of thunderous rumbling. Han Li was standing in midair, and he appeared to have been quite calm and composed, but in reality, he was feeling quite tense. His battle against the silver-robed young man had been quite brief, but it had caused quite a commotion, and this lightning formation was giving off extremely formidable energy fluctuations that were definitely detectable to those at the White Jade Peak. He could only hope that the battle there was still raging, so that he would have enough time to make his escape. Right at this moment, Taoist Zai let loose a low roar, and the lightning formation abruptly rose up from the ground, hovering in midair while rapidly shrinking down. Just a few seconds later, it had shrunk down from its original size of several dozen acres down to a ball of lightning that was only around 200 to 300 feet in size, and it was giving off blinding lightning that was too bright to look directly at. Go! Taoist Zai abruptly rose to its feet as it made a hand seal, and the ball of lightning shot forth as a streak of white light, striking the indentation in the wall of yellow mist at an incredible speed while revolving rapidly. An earth-shattering boom rang out, and all of the mountains within a radius of several hundred kilometers began to rumble violently. Massive trenches opened up in the earth, and some of the smaller mountains were toppled altogether, presenting a doomsday-like scene to behold. The yellow mist restriction was also churning violently, and it was as if turbulent waves were rolling over its surface. Incredibly thick bolts of lightning were erupting out of the ball of lightning before spreading through the yellow mist restriction, peeling it away layer by layer. But at the same time, the surrounding yellow mist was also constantly converging to replenish the mist that was being stripped away, and an impasse had ensued. "Fellow Taoist Han, I need your help," Taoist Zai suddenly said. Han Li immediately sprang up into the air without any hesitation upon hearing this, and after a few flashes of azure light, he appeared no more than 1,000 feet away from the indentation in the yellow mist restriction. He then swept a sleeve through the air to release 72 streaks of golden light, which circled around him momentarily before instantly forming a giant golden sword that was several hundred feet in length with golden lightning flashing around it. Han Li made a hand seal, and the giant sword slashed forward at his behest. All of a sudden, a streak of sword light that was over 1,000 feet in length with golden lightning flashing over the entirety of its blade struck the indentation in the yellow mist with tremendous might. A resounding boom rang out, and that sword strike from Han Li proved to be the final straw that broke the camel's back, tearing apart all of the yellow mist that was converging from all directions to significantly slow down the restriction's rate of recovery. Taoist Zai let loose a loud roar upon seeing this, and the ball of light exploded violently into an incandescent sun as shockwaves that were visible even to the naked eye erupted in all directions. Finally, a huge hole the size of a house had been blown into the yellow mist restriction. After unleashing that attack, the lightning flashing over Taoist Zai's body quickly faded, and it was looking rather weary. Han Li immediately swept a hand through the air to cast an incantation seal, and the hundreds of Tao warrior beings flew back out of the wall of yellow mist before returning to his gourd. Immediately thereafter, a burst of azure light erupted out of his body, sweeping up both Taoist Zai and the gourd before he flew out of the restriction through the massive hole. Right after he had flown out through the hole, yellow mist converged from all directions to seal it again in the blink of an eye. All of the unrest in the wall of yellow mist then quickly subsided, and it was as if nothing had ever happened. Han Li cast his gaze toward the sky outside, and he heaved a long sigh of relief, feeling as if he had just escaped from the brink of death. He then turned to Taoist Zai as he asked, "How are you feeling, Brother Zai?" The restriction was far more formidable than I anticipated. It's a good thing that you intervened at the perfect time to break the restriction, but I'm going to have to take a long rest after this, Taoist Zai replied. Han Li nodded in response, then swept a sleeve through the air to release 12 lengths of lightning-restraining wood, then began to chant an incantation. Arcs of lightning emerged over the lightning-restraining wood, quickly forming a lightning formation with countless lightning runes flashing within it, causing the nearby space to warp and ripple. Han Li closed his eyes momentarily to sense something, then quickly reopened them before giving a slight nod and withdrawing his hand seal. The lightning formation immediately ceased operating, and countless arcs of lightning flowed back into the lengths of lightning-restraining wood before they were stowed away. The lightning teleportation formation was functioning as normal, which meant that there were no further spatial restrictions up ahead. Even for the Immortal Palace, setting up this one restriction would have already been quite difficult, so there's no way that there could be a second, even larger restriction outside of it, Taoist Zai remarked. That may be the case, but the situation over at the White Jade Peak could take a turn at any moment, so let's get out of here for now, Han Li said as he took a glance back at the yellow mist restriction, then made a hand seal to conjure up a smaller lightning formation around himself. Taoist Zai flew into Han Li's grasp as a streak of golden light, following which both of them were teleported away. Around 2 hours later, arcs of golden lightning sprang out of the space above the Crimson Dawn Peak to form a lightning formation, and Han Li emerged inside it, looking a little pale and weary. He had unleashed his lightning teleportation formation consecutively in order to reach the Crimson Dawn Peak as quickly as he could, and even with the support of immortal origin stones, his immortal spiritual power reserves were still severely depleted. Han Li took a deep breath before descending out of the sky. All of the servants had already been alerted by the thunderclap that had just rung out, and they hurriedly rushed forward to greet Han Li. Many of the servants of true immortal stage elders had gone to attend the preaching ceremony as well, and at this moment, There were only 3 servants left on the mountain. After all, the mountain couldn't just be left completely unattended. The 3 servants were just about to extend bows to Han Li when he raised a hand and said, "No need for formalities. Wait here for a moment. I have something to speak to all of you about." After that, Han Li immediately flew into his cave abode in a flash, arriving directly at the spirit medicine garden inside. He had a habit of carrying important items on his body, but he couldn't constantly carry these spirit medicines with him, and that was why he had taken the risk to come back here despite the urgency of the situation. He had expended a huge amount of time, energy, and resources gathering these spirit medicines, and he certainly couldn't just leave them behind. He swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of azure light, which instantly encompassed the entire spirit medicine garden. In the next instant, all of the spirit medicines rose up out of the ground alongside the surrounding plots of spirit soil before flying into Han Li's grasp one after another. He then quickly stored them into suitable containers before stowing them away in his storage bracelet. Moments later, the entire cave abode shuddered as all of the restrictions were removed, and a series of formation tools flew out of all parts of the cave abode before also being stowed away. Outside the cave abode, the 3 servants were exchanging puzzled glances with one another. "What's going on?" a square-faced young man murmured in an uncertain voice. Meng Xing was one of the 3 servants, and he shook his head in response. "I don't know, but judging from Elder Li's expression, something very important must have happened. Perhaps it has something to do with those violent tremors we felt earlier." Right at this moment, Han Li appeared before them in a wraith-like manner amid a flash of azure light, and before the 3 servants had a chance to do anything, he said, "Time is of the essence, so I'll keep it brief. The sect has encountered a major crisis concerning the northern glacial Immortal region, and there will most likely be very far-reaching consequences. I'm planning to leave this place right away, and you have 2 options right now. Come with me or stay here to fend for yourself. You've all been serving me for many years, so even if you choose to stay, I'll leave you with some treasures and resources." The expressions of the 3 servants changed drastically upon hearing this. This was far too abrupt a turn of events, and they had no idea what to do. "I'll give you 10 seconds to make your decision," Han Li said as he clasped his hands behind his back. As soon as his voice trailed off, Meng Qing stepped forward as he cupped his fist in a respectful salute. "Elder Li, my aptitude is quite mediocre, and without everything you've given me, there's no way I would have made it to my current cultivation base. I'm willing to continue to follow you." Han Li nodded in response, then gestured for Meng Qing to stand beside him. Immediately thereafter, the square-faced young man also stepped forward, expressing a desire to follow Han Li. The young man's name was Meng Guang, and he was a man of few words. The final servant remained standing on the spot with his head lowered, and he wasn't saying anything, but his decision was clear. Han Li didn't say anything, either, flipping a hand over to produce a storage pouch that he tossed at the servant. "Thank you, Elder Li," the servant said as he caught the storage pouch before hurriedly extending a respectful bow. "Let's go," Han Li said, then swept a sleeve through the air without delay, releasing a burst of azure light that swept up Meng Qing and Meng Guang before flying away. Shortly thereafter, on a mountaintop not far away from the Crimson Dawn Peak, Han Li's trio was surrounded by a circle of lightning-restraining wood. Han Li made a hand seal, and arcs of golden lightning sprang out of the lightning-restraining wood to form a huge lightning formation around them. The surrounding space began to ripple like water, and the ripples spread outward in all directions. Meng Qing and Meng Guang were quite alarmed to see this, and both of them reflexively closed their eyes. Immediately thereafter, the 3 of them vanished amid a flash of lightning and a rumbling thunderclap. in a certain region of the sea to the west of the ancient cloud continent. This place was near the thunderstorm sea, and the sky was filled with dark clouds with bolts of lightning flashing within them. However, in contrast with the lightning deep within the thunderstorm sea, the lightning here was far less formidable. Occasionally, a bolt of lightning or two would come crashing down out of the sky, but for the average cultivator, as long as they proceeded with caution, they were at no threat of severe bodily harm. The seawater here was extremely murky, almost like mud, and the entire surface of the sea was enshrouded under a dense blanket of gray mist that seemed to have been infinitely vast, and there were strange gusts of wind howling within the mist that produced a sound resembling human sobbing. This place was known as the Sobbing Mist Sea, and it was a very renowned area to the west of the ancient cloud continent, but not for good reasons. Beneath this region of the sea was an enormous gray rock crystal mine, and after it had been completely exhausted of its mineral resources, the seawater had taken on this murky appearance, and this blanket of gray mist had arisen. The murky seawater and the mist weren't harmful to human cultivators, but the marine demon beasts here seemed to intensely detest this environment, and most of them had moved away. As a result, the cultivator population in the region was also decreasing year after year, making this place more and more barren and desolate. Deep within the Sea of Mist was a black island that only had a radius of less than 10 kilometers, and at the center of the island was an extremely desolate black mountain that was several thousand feet tall. Right at this moment, a burst of golden light flashed within an obscure cave at the foot of the mountain, and the entire mountain shuddered slightly. The golden light flashed a few times before abruptly brightening significantly, and even the surrounding black mountain face had been illuminated a golden color, while an enormous aura was surging out of the cave. However, right at this moment, an azure light barrier appeared at the opening of the cave, with countless azure runes flashing over its surface, intercepting the aura before it could spread even further. Even so, the entire island still shuddered violently, while the nearby gray mist was also churned up into a frenzy. Right at this moment, a loud squawk rang out in the distance, and an azure shadow flew out at an incredible speed before landing near the black island, revealing itself to be an azure bird. The bird was massive with a wingspan of around 200 to 300 feet, and it had a large head coupled with a thin neck. Its entire body was covered in arrow-like azure feathers, and there was a large fleshy pouch hanging in front of its chest, giving it a rather hideous appearance. Standing atop the bird's back was none other than the Meng Qianqian, and the bird was naturally feather-yarn. A hint of elevation appeared in Meng Qianqian's eyes at the sight of the golden lightning flashing in the cave, and all of a sudden, the golden lightning in the cave brightened even further, while thick arcs of golden lightning began to emerge. The parts of the black rock walls that were struck by the arcs of golden lightning shattered like tofu, and it didn't take long before the entire mountain collapsed violently to reveal a ball of lightning that was several hundred feet in size. The shadow of a massive lightning formation could be seen within the ball of light, and arcs of golden lightning were crashing into the surrounding azure light barrier, causing it to tremble violently, but it remained intact. All of a sudden, the ball of golden lightning flashed once again, and an incredibly thick pillar of golden light tore through the azure light barrier before erupting into the heavens. All of the world's origin chi within a radius of hundreds of kilometers churned violently, as did the nearby Sea of Mist, forming a huge vortex around the pillar of lightning. The pillar of golden lightning remained for a few seconds before slowly dissipating, and the ball of golden lightning on the island also vanished to reveal Han Li, Meng Xiang, and Meng Guang. Meng Qianqian immediately flew down from Featheryarn's back with an elated expression, and she was just about to say something when Han Li said, "Now's not the time to talk. Come with me." Immediately thereafter, he summoned an azure flying boat amid a flash of azure light, and it instantly swelled to over 100 feet in size. One either side of the flying boat were 2 rows of azure spirit wings that were formed by spiritual power. This azure Luan boat was something that he had obtained from a true immortal while undertaking a mission, and it wasn't a treasure of a particularly high caliber, but it was quite fast, nonetheless. Han Li flew onto the flying boat, closely followed by Meng Xing and Meng Guang. Meng Qianqian faltered slightly before also doing the same, then cast an incantation seal to stow Feather-Yarn into her spirit beast pouch. With a flick of his finger, around a dozen thick streaks of azure sword chi were sent flying through the air before striking the black island down below, instantly destroying what remained of it and causing it to completely sink into the sea without a trace. At the same time, Han Li made a hand seal with his other hand, and the azure flying boat began to glow radiantly as it shot forth into the distance as an azure shadow, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Not long after their departure, 2 streaks of light arrived from afar, revealing a pair of humanoid figures, one of which was a middle-aged Taoist priest wearing a black hat, while the other was a gray-robed elderly man. This is the place. The spiritual chi fluctuations still haven't completely dissipated yet, the Taoist priest said with a hint of excitement on his face. There was an elated look on the gray-robed elderly man's face as well, and he nodded in response. Indeed, and these are some extremely formidable spiritual chi fluctuations. I spotted a huge pillar of golden light rising up into the air from here. Could it be that some treasure is about to emerge? As he was speaking, he had already released his spiritual sense to inspect his surroundings. That's definitely a possibility. This region of the sea has always been very unpredictable, so nothing would surprise me, the Taoist priest replied, then flipped a hand over to produce a yellow plate treasure with countless runes engraved on its surface. Bursts of rippling yellow light swept forth from the plate treasures, encompassing the entire surrounding area within a radius of several kilometers. After scouring the area for a while to no avail, the gray-robed elderly man asked, "Have you found anything, fellow Taoist Wan?" The Taoist priest remained silent, continuing to use his plate treasure to release halos of rippling yellow light. Moments later, he withdrew his hand seal and the gray-robed elderly man hurriedly asked, "How did it go?" That pillar of light wasn't a precursor for the emergence of any treasure. Instead, it was a result of someone unleashing some type of ability here, the Taoist priest sighed. The gray-robed elderly man's face fell slightly upon hearing this, and he was still holding onto a shred of hope as he asked, "Are you sure?" All 9 layers of restrictions in my precious domain plate have been activated, so there's definitely no mistaking it, the Taoist priest replied with a roll of his eyes. The gray-robed elderly man shook his head with a wry smile as he replied, "In that case, it looks like we got excited for nothing. By the way, have you managed to detect that person's cultivation base?" Judging from the lingering spiritual chi fluctuations here, they were most likely at or above the body integration stage, the Taoist priest replied. The gray-robed elderly man's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and a hint of lingering fear appeared in his eyes as he said, "In that case, it's a good thing that we arrived late. Otherwise, if we had been any earlier and irked that senior, then we would have been in severe danger. In any case, we should leave this place right away to avoid any potential misunderstandings," the Taoist priest replied in a calm voice. "Indeed, fellow Taoist Wan," the gray-robed elderly man immediately replied with a nod. Shortly thereafter, 2 streaks of light rose up into the sky before flying away into the distance. At this point, Han Li and the others were already hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. Han Li circled around above the sea for a while, then arrived in another large coastal city in the western region of the ancient Cloud Continent. This place was known as Heavenly Cloud City, and it was the capital of the Heavenly Cloud Nation. It was quite a large city that directly neighbored a spirit vein of a decent size, making it a very habitable place. Not only was the city quite close to the thunderstorm sea, its large size meant that many of the cultivators passing through the area would choose to stop here for some rest and to replenish supplies. Some of the high-grade cultivators returning from adventures in the thunderstorm sea would also come to the city to sell or exchange their spoils. As a result, Heavenly Cloud City was becoming more and more prosperous by the day, and it had already become one of the largest cities within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers. Han Li and the others snuck into the city, then chose a secluded medium-sized inn to stay in. Even the most formidable cultivator stationed in the city was only at the body integration stage, so there was naturally no chance of Han Li being discovered. That night in the guest hall, Han Li was seated on the main chair, while Meng Xiang, Meng Guang, and Meng Qian were standing respectfully before him. After conjuring up a soundproofing restriction, Han Li gave the trio a brief recount of what had taken place in the Blaze Dragon Dao. At this point, Meng Qian possessed the most advanced cultivation base out of all of the servants, but she was quite lacking in life experience, and she was momentarily completely rooted to the spot after hearing such shocking news. Meng Xiang and Meng Guang were already aware that something had to have happened during the preaching ceremony, but they were still astonished after hearing Han Li's story. Qian, I'll give you a choice just like I gave the others, and the conditions remain the same. What is your choice? Han Li asked. Meng Qian remained silent, seemingly still reeling from the bombshell that had just been dropped on her. If you need to discuss the matter with Yunggui before you make a decision. There's no need for that, Meng Qian replied without any hesitation. I wasn't hesitating, Elder Li, I was just surprised. Regardless of what choice my brother makes, I'm willing to continue to follow you. Han Li nodded in response, then said, Right now, I'm no longer an elder of the Blaze Dragon Dao, so you're not to refer to me as such in the future, understood? Yes, Senior Li, the three servants immediately replied in unison. Han Li didn't say anything further as he rose to his feet, then made his way over to the window, casting his gaze out toward the distant thunderstorm sea with a contemplative look in his eyes. After a long while, Han Li still hadn't said anything, and after a brief hesitation, Meng Qian asked in a timid voice, What are your plans from here, Senior Li? Han Li offered no response, seemingly still contemplating something in silence. Meng Qian's trio exchanged a glance with one another, and they naturally didn't dare to disturb him, so they could only wait in silence. A long while later, Han Li finally declared, I'm planning to leave the ancient Cloud Continent for a while. Meng Qian faltered slightly upon hearing this, then hurriedly said, Brother Li, my brother and brother's son still haven't arrived yet. Would you be able to wait a bit longer? They're very loyal to you, and I'm sure they'll choose to continue to follow you. Your cultivation bases are still quite lacking, so I'll leave all of you here in Heavenly Cloud City. This city has quite a good spirit vein nearby, and it'll be perfect for your cultivation needs, Han Li replied. Meng Qian was rather unwilling to accept this arrangement, but she could tell that Han Li had already made up his mind, so she could only nod in response. Yes, Senior Li. Come with me, Han Li said, then began to make his way outside. Shortly thereafter, the four of them arrived in a peaceful forest by the name of Moonview Forest in the western part of the city. The forest was closest to the spirit vein, so the world's origin chi here was very abundant, and there were individual courtyards littered throughout the forest, all of which were enshrouded in restrictions and separated by some bamboo forests and fake mountains. These were temporary cave abodes constructed by high-grade cultivators who had come from outside the city. After all, some cultivators preferred peace and quiet and didn't want to stay in inns. At this moment, Han Li and his group were strolling through the forest under the guidance of a white-robed young man. All of our cave abodes were designed by master artisans, and the forest is split up into 4 areas, A, B, C, and D. The cave abodes in Area A have the most abundant spiritual qi, while the ones in Area D have the least spiritual qi. Right now, we're in Area D, but even here, the world's origin is far more abundant than other places in the city, and it can accelerate one's rate of cultivation by a quarter, whereas the cave abodes in Area A can enhance one's rate of cultivation by a half. The white-robed young man introduced in an enthusiastic fashion. "Take us to Area A," Han Li said in an expressionless manner. The white-robed young man could tell that Han Li was the one calling the shots, and he was ecstatic to hear this. "Please come with me, fellow Taoists." Moments later, the group passed through an archway and arrived in a large bamboo forest, within which some cave abodes could be seen. Han Li raised an eyebrow upon seeing this. The world's origin qi here was far more abundant than outside, almost comparable with some of the mountains in the Blaze Dragon Dao, and Meng Qing and Meng Guang were ecstatic to sense this, while Meng Qianqian was trailing along at the back in silence with a complex look on her face. "This is Area A. What do you think, fellow Taoists?" the white-robed young man asked. Instead of replying to the question, Han Li asked, "Are there any vacant cave abodes here?" The white-robed young man's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this, and he replied, "We do. There are 3 vacant cave abodes." "What price can you do for me if I rent them long-term?" Han Li asked. The white-robed young man took a glance at Han Li, then stated a price. Han Li turned to inspect his surroundings, refraining from offering a response for now. "Our cave abodes are the best in Heavenly Cloud City, so the rent is a little more expensive, but you're definitely getting good value for money." Han Li waved a hand to cut off the white-robed young man, then pulled out a storage pouch that he tossed at him as he said, "I'll rent all 3 cave abodes for 300 years for now." The white-robed young man caught the storage pouch, then inspected its contents briefly with his spiritual sense, and an ecstatic look immediately appeared on his face. He pulled out 3 azure badges before handing them to Han Li, then said, "These are the restriction badges for the 3 cave abodes. Do you need me to take you there?" "No need, we'll go on our own. You can go now," Han Li replied as he accepted the badges. The white-robed young man promptly departed, while Han Li pulled out another storage pouch before handing it to the 3 servants along with the 3 badges. "There are some cultivation resources in this storage pouch. Stay here and cultivate, and I've already informed Meng Yunggui and Sun Buzheng to come here." Meng Qing and Meng Guang both nodded in response. "How long will you be gone for, Senior Li?" Meng Qianqian suddenly asked. "At least a few decades, perhaps even over a century. If any of you change your mind during this time, then you're free to leave," Han Li replied in a calm manner, then abruptly vanished from the spot. Meng Qianqian hurriedly strode forward a few steps, but Han Li was already nowhere to be seen, so she could only heave a forlorn sigh, but a determined look then appeared in her eyes. Several months later, a massive black boat was sailing through the waves somewhere on the thunderstorm sea. The seawater around the giant boat was churning incessantly, with waves that were several hundred feet tall occasionally rising up, and the dark clouds in the sky were hanging at a very low altitude, with thick bolts of lightning crashing down every once in a while. The boat was completely unobstructed by the waves and lightning, and it was rapidly advancing over the sea like a giant beast. The black was a seafaring lightning boat, and it was traveling from the ancient cloud continent to Thunderclap city of the primordial wave continent. In contrast with the hostile environment outside, everything was very harmonious within the giant boat, with people constantly passing through the corridors, while the restaurants and tea rooms on the top floor of the boat were very lively and bustling. Some of the cultivators in the boat had even gathered together to hold some small exchange events, or to discuss cultivation insights and experiences. One of the rooms in the boat was completely enshrouded within a soundproofing azure light barrier, and on the bed inside the room sat a man with a dark complexion. There were 7 blue rings hovering around him, and they were drifting up and down incessantly while giving off a faint buzzing sound. The man's eyes were closed, and he was making a string of hand seals. Meanwhile, the 7 rings were glowing brighter and brighter, and a formidable burst of law power fluctuations was spreading through the air. A faint smile appeared on the man's face as he made a hand seal, and the 7 rings instantly fell into his grasp. The man was none other than Han Li in disguise, and these 7 rings were called the 7 bright star rings, a rare set of immortal treasures that he had found in the portly black-robed guard's storage tool. It was primarily used to trap enemies, and the law power that it contained was also geared toward trapping. Han Li had conducted some experiments during the past few days to find that these 7 bright star rings were quite formidable. In particular, when used during clear nights, the rings could resonate with the star power in the night sky to significantly enhance their power. It was most likely the case that Han Li had struck with such efficiency and brutality that the portly guard didn't even have a chance to summon this treasure before he was killed. Han Li opened his mouth to produce a burst of azure light that stowed the rings back into his body. Even though he had already recovered the integrated 5 extremes mountain, having more trapping treasures was naturally never a bad thing. During the time that he had spent on the seafaring lightning boat, the rings had already been partially refined, and it wasn't going to take much longer for him to complete the refinement process. Aside from that, the thin guard also had a formidable immortal treasure called the Usura Heavenly Ghost Flag in his storage tool. However, this was a ghostly immortal treasure that wasn't very suitable for his cultivation arts, so he only briefly inspected it before returning it to his storage bracelet. As for the silver-robed young man, he was a golden immortal cultivator who clearly had very powerful backers, and he had far more treasures than his 2 late true immortal stage guards, possessing 4 immortal treasures. Aside from the integrated 5 extremes mountain and the black inkstone, there was also the silver bell that he had summoned at the beginning of the battle and a black fang-shaped sword. With that in mind, Han Li opened his mouth to release the integrated 5 extremes mountain, and it hovered in front of him while revolving on the spot, releasing a vast expanse of gray light that was interspersed with gray runes and was giving off a burst of formidable law power fluctuations. He had already carefully examined the integrated 5 extremes mountain to find that its outward appearance hadn't changed much, but internally, it had changed drastically, with many spirit materials infused into all of the 5 extreme mountains. Even though he had refined the 5 extreme mountains, materials like the divine essence-effused mountain and Arctic origin crystals had proven extremely difficult to come by, and he had only just barely managed to gather enough to refine the 5 extreme mountains. Somehow, the silver-robed young man was able to find a large amount of all 5 types of materials, enhancing the power of the 5 extreme mountains by almost 2-fold. Furthermore, he had also used some type of refinement method to completely fuse the 5 mountains into one, thereby further significantly bolstering its power. In particular, the law powers imbued within it had become far more formidable than before. Various thoughts were flashing through Han Li's mind as he felt the law fluctuations emanating from the small gray mountain. Back in the spirit realm, his cultivation base had been too lowly for him to be able to grasp law powers, so he hadn't paid much heed to the hint of law powers that the integrated 5 extremes mountain contained. However, things were completely different now. Having already reached the late true immortal stage, he had faced many formidable foes and witnessed many types of law powers, thereby granting him better insight into the law fluctuations that the integrated 5 extremes mountain was giving off. This law power was extremely profound, and it seemed to have been related to trapping, but was also completely different from the trapping, law powers imbued within the 7 bright star rings. However, as for how these law powers differed and how he could hope to truly master them, Han Li still had no clue, and he shook his head to rid himself of that train of thought. Even directly devouring the heaven-controlling vile spirit liquid that contained the power of time laws wasn't enough for him to master the laws of time, so it was undoubtedly going to be even more difficult to try and master certain law powers through immortal treasures alone. Seeing as he couldn't figure it out, then there was no point thinking excessively about it. In any case, adding these formidable treasure to his collection was certainly a good thing. With that in mind, he opened his mouth to swallow the integrated 5 extremes mountain again. He was the one who had created this treasure, so it wasn't going to take him long to refine it again now that he had recovered it. Aside from the integrated 5 extremes mountain, Han Li had recovered another lost treasure from the silver-robed young man's storage tool, namely the thunderstorm wings. This treasure was nowhere near as powerful as the integrated 5 extremes mountain, but it had been with him ever since his time in the mortal realm, so he was naturally very happy to have recovered it. Perhaps the thunderstorm wings hadn't managed to catch the silver-robed young man's eye, but it had never been refined, and it was casually tossed to the bottom of his storage tool, where it had most likely already stayed for many years. Hence, he was able to easily break the seal and regain control over the thunderstorm wings, thereby saving him the trouble of having to refine it. At the moment, Han Li was simultaneously refining the integrated 5 extremes mountain, the 7 bright star rings, and that silver bell in his body all at once. The bell was an immortal treasure that contained some type of soundwave law powers, and the fact that it was able to scatter the azure bamboo cloudswarm swords with just a single attack was clear testament to its power, and that was why Han Li had decided to work on refining it. As for the black fang-shaped sword, it was similar to the Usura heavenly ghost flag in that it was also a Yinatribtu treasure, so he had set it aside. At the moment, his spiritual sense was comparable to that of even early golden immortal cultivators, but refining 3 immortal treasures at once was still his limit. As for the black inkstone that was capable of unleashing the soul-destroying true light, it contained far more law power than the integrated 5 extremes mountain, the silver bell, and the other immortal treasures. Han Li naturally wanted to be able to make the treasure his own, but it seemed to be containing some type of restriction that made it impossible for Han Li to refine it no matter what he tried. This left Han Li feeling a little frustrated, but he wasn't short on immortal treasures at the moment, and he didn't have that much time on his hands, so he could only set the inkstone aside for now. Aside from immortal treasures, the trio storage tools also contained many other treasures, as well as countless pills and precious materials. In particular, the silver-robed young man alone possessed as many as over 10 materials that were imbued with law powers. Additionally, the 3 of them had a total of over 10,000 immortal origin stones, and with such a massive haul, Han Li wouldn't have to worry about immortal origin stones for a very long time. However, the biggest pleasant surprise to Han Li was that he had found a large amount of Dao pill ingredients in the silver-robed young man's storage tool. There were as many as 7 of the 9 ingredients listed on the Dao pill recipe, and all of them were in quite large quantities as well. Han Li was initially quite shocked by this, but everything immediately made sense to him after he found an identical Dao pill recipe to his own. It seemed that the silver-robed young man also had intentions of refining a Dao pill, and given his status and the enormous power of the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, that wasn't going to be a difficult objective to accomplish. But now, those ingredients had fallen into Han Li's hands. At this point, he was only missing two Dao pill ingredients, the heaven-made ginseng root and the dewform herb, and he was sure that he would be able to acquire them as long as he kept an active eye on the information circulating within the Transient Guild. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to him, and he flipped a hand over to produce a palm-sized golden badge, which was crafted from some type of special metal, and it was extremely heavy despite its small size. On one side of the badge was a design of a golden dragon that was roaring to the heavens, giving off a sense of unmatched power and regal authority, while on the other side was a name, Tao Yu. Above the name was a feather crown design, and Han Li's expression darkened slightly at the sight of the golden badge. Right at this moment, he suddenly raised an eyebrow as he opened the window of his cabin. Outside was the turbulent thunderstorm sea, but the seafaring lightning boat had restrictions all around it, so the sound of the thunder and the crashing waves was mostly kept out. A faint glimmer of golden light appeared in the distant sky before vanishing in a flash, and in the next instant, a burst of spatial fluctuations erupted within Han Li's cabin as a lightning formation appeared, following which Taoist Zhai emerged inside it. The golden lightning formation quickly surged into Taoist Zai's body as arcs of golden lightning, and Han Li took a brief glance at Taoist Zai before remarking, "Looks like you've made a complete recovery." Taoist Zai nodded in response. "I didn't think the lightning power here would be so abundant. That was really beneficial to my recovery." Han Li offered no response to this as he stepped aside to allow Taoist Zai into the cabin, then sat back down with his legs crossed. Taoist Zai had severely exhausted itself from the earlier battle, and after arriving in the thunderstorm sea, it had immediately begun absorbing the extremely abundant lightning power here to replenish itself. To Han Li's relief, it was able to make a full recovery in just a few months. Having a golden immortal stage ally was extremely helpful, so it was very important that Taoist Zai was in good condition. "It looks like you're still worried about that Tao Yu," Taoist Zai remarked as it caught sight of the golden badge that Han Li was holding. "I wouldn't exactly say that I'm worried. I already killed him, so there's no point in thinking about it. I'm just wondering if the Immortal Palace has already found out that I'm the one who killed him," Han Li replied. Previously, he had spent a great deal of immortal origin stones to search for information on this golden badge in the Transient Guild, and his efforts had paid off. This badge was an elder badge of the Immortal Palace, and Tao Yu was the name of the silver-robed young man. He was also a newly promoted elder of the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, and on top of that, he wasn't actually from the Northern Glacial Immortal region. Instead, he had been sent here from some other immortal region over 1,000 years ago to accumulate experience, and he certainly wouldn't have anticipated meeting his demise in this foreign immortal region. There was no way that the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace would let him get away with this, so at this moment, he was leaving the ancient cloud continent with the intention of returning to the Black Wind Sea, both to check on his earthly deity avatar and to lay low for a while. The Black Wind Sea was a very secluded place that was virtually completely cut off from the outside world, thereby making it a suitable place for him to hide from the Immortal Palace. Given the power of the Immortal Palace, it shouldn't be difficult for them to identify you as the culprit, but you left in a very timely fashion, and thanks to that long-distance lightning teleportation formation, even the Immortal Palace shouldn't be able to track you down anytime soon, Taoist Zai said. "I certainly hope that's the case," Han Li said with a wry smile. By the way, I didn't think you would be able to master the lightning teleportation formation so quickly. That came as quite a surprise to me. The formation is quite profound and combines both lightning power and spatial power. It's a good thing that I already have innate mastery over lightning power. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to grasp it so easily, Taoist Zai replied. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to Han Li and he asked, "Have you noticed anything strange or interesting while cultivating in the thunderstorm sea, Brother Zai?" "Not that I can recall. Are you referring to anything in particular?" Taoist Zai asked. Han Li hesitated momentarily, then told Taoist Zai about the giant eye in the lightning cloud vortex that he had seen during his last trip across the thunderstorm sea. A solemn look appeared on Taoist Zai's face as it exclaimed, "That's very shocking to hear." "Does anything in your memories match the description of the eye?" Han Li asked. "No, this is my first time here in this thunderstorm sea. Having said that, I don't think even a high zenith stage Jade Immortal would be able to severely wound you with just a single glance like that giant eye did," Taoist Zai said. Both Zhao Jinhan and Tao Lord Bailey were only one step away from reaching the high zenith stage, but I feel like even if they were to reach the high zenith stage, they still wouldn't have been able to display even a fraction of that eye's power, Han Li agreed with a nod. This place is already quite close to the central region of the thunderstorm sea, and that's where I encountered that giant eye. Now that you've already fully recovered, I suggest you remain inside the seafaring lightning boat so you don't run the risk of encountering that formidable being, Han Li said. Furthermore, he had followed his own advice, remaining strictly within the seafaring lightning boat during this entire trip thus far. "All right," Taoist Zai replied with a nod. Meanwhile, Ouyang Qiushan and the other Tao lords that had turned on the Blaze Dragon Tao were standing in the main hall of the sect, and all of their auras were rather unstable, indicating that they still hadn't recovered from their injuries. Standing across from them were 7 or 8 other golden immortals from the northern glacial Immortal Palace, while Zhao Jinhan was seated on the main chair in the hall. All of the Tao lords were rather disgruntled to see Zhao Jinhan occupying such an important seat in the sect, and a few of them were glowering at him with outright fury, but Zhao Jinhan paid no heed to them as he asked, "How are things coming along?" "We've already managed to track down Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai. Both of them fled to the Upper R continent with severe injuries, and Elder Lu Yue has already gone after them with some other elders. I'm sure an outcome will arise there soon. However, Bailey Yan remains elusive to this day, and it's unclear how he's managed to do so," an elder of the Immortal Palace reported. "Very good. Even though Bailey Yan is still on the run, he's already been severely wounded, and after his karmic fire remission, his past several million years of cultivation has all gone to waste, so he won't pose a threat to anyone. In fact, he most likely won't even be able to withstand the 5th decay," Zhao Jinhan said with a nod. It seemed as if he was saying this to all of the Immortal Palace cultivators present, but all of the Tao lords were also listening with mixed feelings. "Tao Lord Aoyang, Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai have committed the cardinal crime of treason by assisting the Reincarnation Palace. According to the rules of the Heavenly Court, all of their relatives and disciples must be apprehended and sent to the Heavenly Court. Have you done this yet?" Zhao Jinhan asked as he turned to Ouyang Qiushan. "Yes," Ouyang Qiushan replied with his eyelid twitching slightly. "Very good. You can all go now," Zhao Jinhan said with a dismissive wave of his hand. All of the Immortal Palace cultivators promptly departed, while the Tao lords exchanged a few glances with one another, and only after a subtle gesture was made by Ouyang Qiushan did all of them exit the hall as well. Moments later, all of the Tao lords were gathered outside the hall, and the golden-furred man among them wore a furious expression as he grumbled, "What are the intentions of the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace? Dao Lord Aoyang. The incident concerning Bailey Yan has already come to a conclusion, so why are they still here? Are they trying to take advantage of this opportunity to take over our Blaze Dragon Dao? If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have helped them target Dao Lord Bailey. If Dao Lord Bailey were here, Zhao Jinhan definitely wouldn't have dared to be so arrogant, the silver-skinned woman said in a cold voice. Complex looks appeared on everyone's faces upon hearing this, while Aoyang Qiushan remained silent with a wry smile on his face. The Immortal Palace's intentions were very clear. Following the recently concluded battle, the Blaze Dragon Dao had suffered severe losses, and it was no longer a match for the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace. At this point, Zhao Jinhan alone would have been sufficient to wipe out the entire Blaze Dragon Dao. While Aoyang Qiushan and the Dao Lords were lamenting the circumstances, a grim look had also appeared on Zhao Jinhan's face inside the hall. At this point, he had already stood up from his chair and was packing back and forth with his brows tightly furrowed. Moments later, a burst of white light suddenly rose up from his body, then transformed into a white light screen in front of him. A white humanoid figure appeared on the screen with dazzling white light radiating from their entire body, giving them a rather blurry appearance, and one could only just barely make him out to be a middle-aged man. Zhao Jinhan immediately ceased in his packing as he forced a smile onto his own face. Elder Tao. Zhao Jinhan, it's already been several months. Have you found out who the killer of my son is? The white figure asked in a cold voice. It was an inner sect elder of the Blaze Dragon Dao by the name of Li Feiyu. He has already fled from the Blaze Dragon Dao, and we've sent out people to apprehend him, Zhao Jinhan immediately replied. An inner sect elder? You're telling me a mere inner sect elder was able to kill Yuer? The white figure asked as a hint of fury crept into his voice. He's no ordinary elder, Zhao Jinhan hurriedly replied. According to our investigation, he was only in the Blaze Dragon Dao for no more than 1,000 years, and when he first arrived, he was only at the early true immortal stage, but we've since determined his cultivation base to have already reached the late true immortal, and he's cultivating the Blaze Dragon Dao's mantra axis scripture. On top of that, he seems to be connected to Bailey Yan as well. I have a feeling he most likely has some connection to the Reincarnation Palace. I don't care who he is. I entrusted my son to you and now he's been killed. Zhao Jinhan, you better provide me with a satisfactory outcome. Otherwise. The white figure's voice trailed off there, but the threat that he was making was already very clear. Zhao Jinhan's expression stiffened slightly upon hearing this, and he lowered his head slightly as he replied, Rest assured, Elder Tao, I'll be sure to get to the bottom of this. The white figure gave another cold harumph before vanishing amid a flash of light, following which Zhao Jinhan raised his head with a steely expression. He then called out to someone outside the hall, and a golden-robed young man immediately flew in before falling to one knee. What are your instructions, Palace Master? 2 years flew by in a flash. Outside Thunderclap City, a giant boat slowly drew to a halt, and moments later, a series of figures flew out from within before descending onto a huge dock. Han Li was among them, and a reminiscent look appeared in his eyes at the sight of Thunderclap City. At this moment, his aura was restrained to the early Grand Ascension stage, so he didn't stand out among the cultivators around him. He took a subtle glance at his surroundings, and upon verifying that there was nothing strange happening on the dock, his expression eased ever so slightly as he quickly made his way into the city. Thunderclap City hadn't changed much since his last visit. The urgent lightning trees were still as vast as ever, and the streets were just as packed and lively. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li made his way toward a certain direction, and it didn't take long before he arrived at the Thunderclap City Immortal outlet. Just like before, The Immortal outlet was very lively and bustling with many cultivators inside, most of whom were gathered around the mission's wall. Han Li also arrived in front of the mission's wall, then cast his gaze upward, and a grim look quickly appeared on his face. Near the top of the wall was an extremely eye-catching mission that was presented in large golden text. Apprehend Blaze Dragon Dao Elder Li Feiyu. Reward: 20,000 Immortal Origin Stones. Anyone who provides accurate information on him can also receive a reward of 2,000 Immortal Origin Stones. After the mission was a portrait of Han Li. Looks like things have gotten quite troublesome. These immortal outlets are present on all continents, so you're most likely a fugitive all over the entire immortal region at the moment, Taoist Zai mused in Han Li's mind. 20,000 Immortal Origin Stones, eh? The Immortal Palace sure does think highly of me. Han Li chuckled coldly internally. Who is this Li Feiyu? 20,000 Immortal Origin Stones is a huge reward. Haven't you heard? An internal conflict arose in the Blaze Dragon Dao several years ago, and it's said that their first Dao Lord was working with an evil organization to try and take over the entire immortal region. Fortunately, Palace Master Zhao of the Immortal Palace discovered the plot in time and put an end to it. I'm assuming this Li Feiyu must be an ally of the Blaze Dragon Dao's first Dao Lord. I see, he must have also committed some heinous crimes. I'm sure he did. Otherwise, there's no way they'd be offering such a huge reward for his capture. There was a spirited discussion taking place in the nearby crowd, and Han Li inspected the mission's wall for a while longer, then walked around the immortal outlet for a bit before leaving in an unhurried manner. Even though he was also confident that there was no way that the Immortal Palace would be able to track him down, he was currently being wanted everywhere, so he had to be careful. Otherwise, a single misstep could lead to his demise. After leaving the Immortal outlet, Han Li visited the materials shops in Thunderclap City. Thunderclap City was an important city that connected the primordial wave continent to the ancient cloud continent, so it had an even more diverse formation of materials than some of the large cities on the ancient cloud continent. After returning to the Black Wind Sea, it would become rather inconvenient to purchase things, and he couldn't make all of his purchases solely through the Transient Guild, so he had to buy some things here first in case certain unprecedented needs arose. After doing all of that, he left Thunderclap City. At this point, he had already adopted another disguise, transforming into a fair-skinned scholar, and his cultivation base had also been restrained down to the body integration stage. He lingered momentarily outside the city, then flew away in an unhurried manner as a mundane streak of azure light. Aren't there teleportation formations in Thunderclap City? Taoist Zai asked in his mind. Why didn't you leave using one of them? That would have made things a lot easier. Thunderclap City is a very renowned city on the primordial wave continent. If the Immortal Palace is searching for me, this is most likely one of the places that they'll be keeping a close eye on, and there may be some treasures here that can expose my true appearance, so it's better to proceed with caution, Han Li explained. Not only was he going to refrain from using teleportation formations in Thunderclap City, he was going to avoid them elsewhere as well. At his current speed, it would only take him several years to cross the primordial wave continent anyway. You sure are as cautious as ever. Even while buying things in the city, you adopted several disguises. It can't hurt to be careful. At this point, Han Li had already flown a sufficient distance out of the city, and after confirming that he wasn't being followed, he immediately accelerated, flying into the distance at a far higher speed than before. Unbeknownst to Han Li, the extra caution that he was exercising had indeed paid off. In order to search for him, the northern glacial immortal region had invested a huge amount of effort and resources. Not only were they actively scouring the entire immortal region for him, Special sensory restrictions had also been set up in the teleportation halls of all of the major cities. The restriction had been set up in accordance with the aura that Han Li had left behind in the wake of his battle against Tao Yu, and it would raise the alarm if Han Li were in its vicinity. All true immortals had some ways through which they could alter their auras, so this was far from a foolproof method, but it was already the best that the Immortal Palace could do. In order to set up these restrictions, not only had the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace invested a huge amount of immortal origin stones, Zhao Jinhan was forced to give up a massive portion of his personal wealth as well. As for why these restrictions had been set up in teleportation halls, this was because, generally speaking, one would reflexively activate their cultivation arts to protect oneself in the instant that they were teleported away, and that was the best opportunity for the sensory restrictions to detect Han Li. The population density near Thunderstorm City was quite high, so Han Li didn't fly at his full speed, only raising his speed to about the same level as the average true immortal while also taking as secluded a route as possible. Only after passing the areas of high population density did he gradually begin to accelerate. The primordial wave continent was a very perilous place, but given his current powers, he would have no trouble traversing through it. After about 3 years of travel, he finally arrived at Seaside City. Instead of entering the city, he hovered in midair, looking down at the small city from above. A short while later, he cast his gaze toward another direction, where the teleportation formation that led to the Black Wind Sea was situated. "I'm finally back," Han Li murmured to himself, then flew in that direction as a faint azure shadow. Even though many years had already passed by, he naturally hadn't forgotten where the teleportation formation was situated, and it didn't take long before he was close to reaching the location. All of a sudden, he stopped cold in his tracks as his brows furrowed ever so slightly. As it turned out, the seaside cave had disappeared, and it had been replaced by a city. The city wasn't very large, only less than 10 kilometers in size, and its walls were constructed from giant white bricks, standing at around 200 to 300 feet tall. The entire city was enshrouded under a dense light barrier that was giving off a gentle white glow, and through the light barrier, one could see a series of tall buildings. At the center of the city was a white pagoda that was far taller than the surrounding city walls, presenting a magnificent sight to behold. There was only a single city gate, above which was a plaque that read, "Wave View City." Han Li swept his spiritual sense through the surrounding area momentarily before landing outside the city gate, where there was already a long line of cultivators waiting to enter the city. At this moment, Han Li had disguised himself into a young man with a yellow complexion, and his cultivation base had also been restrained down to the body integration stage, so he didn't stand out at all. As soon as Han Li joined the line, the slightly portly young man in front of him turned around with a friendly smile as he said, "I don't recall seeing you around these parts, fellow Taoist. Is this your first time in Wave View City?" "That's right," Han Li replied with an indifferent nod. The young man seemed to have been completely oblivious to Han Li's rather cold demeanor, and his smile remained unchanged as he asked, "Where are you from, fellow Taoist? Have you also come here because you want to go out to hunt for marine demon beasts?" Han Li offered no response, merely taking a glance at the young man to discover that he was at the late body integration stage. The young man's smile stiffened slightly at the sight of Han Li's slightly hostile gaze, and an awkward look appeared on his face as he said, "Please pardon my rudeness. My name is Qin Zhang and I have a decent reputation in this city. If you want to form a demon beast hunting team, you can come to me at any time." Han Li's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, and he nodded in response. "I see. Greetings, fellow Taoist Qin. My surname is Liu." "It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, fellow Taoist Liu," Qin Zhang said with a smile. He was a very talkative person, and after a brief chat, the tense atmosphere quickly mellowed out. Do you know when this city was constructed, fellow Taoist Qin? I came here once several hundred years ago, and this city didn't exist back then, Han Li asked. This city was only constructed just over 100 years ago, and there's a teleportation formation in the city leading to the Black Wind Sea, so there are often specialty local products from that region appearing in the city. As a result, it's become more and more renowned and attracted many people, so it's been quite prosperous of late, Qin Zhang explained. I see, Han Li replied with a nod, and his heart sank slightly upon hearing this. This was a sign that the Black Wind Sea's connection with the outside world had improved significantly, which was perhaps a good thing for the Black Wind Sea. After all, the Black Wind Sea had far less abundance in cultivation resources than the rest of the northern glacial Immortal region, so this was certainly good news for the cultivators in the area. However, this was certainly not encouraging news for Han Li, who was trying to lay low. While the two of them were chatting with one another, the line continued to progress onward, and it didn't take long before it was their turn. After submitting an entrance fee, Han Li was quickly allowed into the city. Everything in Wave View City gave off a sense of newness. The ground and the streets were virtually completely pristine, as expected of a newly constructed city. Han Li took a glance at his surroundings, then cast his gaze up toward the pagoda in the distance. The white pagoda had 5 floors, and there were 5 blue jade pillars hovering above it, each of which several dozen feet tall and as thick as a bucket with countless runes inscribed upon them. The 5 jade pillars were radiating blue light and bursts of formidable spatial power fluctuations that were resonating with one another. Qin Zhang could see Han Li looking up at the pagoda, and he asked, "You must be on your way to the Black Wind Sea, right, fellow Taoist Liu?" Han Li nodded in response, then asked, "Does the teleportation still happen once per century?" He didn't bother to try and hide his intentions of going to the Black Wind Sea, as many of the people who came to this city were en route to the same destination. That's right. You came at a very good time, as the next teleportation takes place in less than 2 years. However, there are many people seeking to go to the Black Wind Sea at the moment, so competition for spots is very fierce, and it most likely won't be easy for you to claim one, Qin Zhang said in a meaningful voice. It sounds like you have a way to secure a spot. If that's the case, please enlighten me, Han Li said. Indeed, judging from how many people were in the city, the teleportation spots most likely were going to be hotly contested. Of course, if he were to display his true power, then he would be able to secure a spot with ease, but that could expose his identity. So if he could acquire a spot from Qin Zhang instead, he was willing to do so, even at an inflated cost. I do indeed have a spot right now, and if you're interested, we can have a more in-depth conversation, Qin Zhang said as he glanced at a nearby restaurant with a mysterious smile on his face. Of course, Han Li replied with a nod. The two of them entered the restaurant, requested a booth, then ordered some food and wine. The clear spirit wine of this restaurant is quite exquisite. Have a taste, fellow Taoist Liu, Qin Zhang said with a smile as he filled Han Li's cup. The wine was a clear green color with a thin layer of spirit mist drifting on top, giving off an intoxicating aroma. Han Li took a glance at it, but remained unmoved. In contrast, Qin Zhang seemed to have been quite an avid drinker, and he downed 2 cups of wine in a row. Right as Qin Zhang was about to fill his cup a 3rd time, Han Li finally interjected, "Let's leave the drinking for later, fellow Taoist Qin. How about we discuss the teleportation spot first?" "Please pardon me, fellow Taoist Liu. I no longer have a need for sustenance, but I've never been able to give up good food and wine. Let's cut straight to the chase. I can tell that you're quite a direct and straightforward person, so I won't waste your time." Qin Zhang set down his cup as he spoke, and a serious look appeared on his face. "Go ahead," Han Li prompted. "This is your first time here in Wave View City, so you're probably unfamiliar with the state of affairs here. Right now, there are many people who want to go to the Black Wind Sea, but for some reason, the Black Wind Sea has severely tightened its regulation of teleportation spots, so not just anyone can claim one with immortal origin stones alone. On top of that, you need to have some local forces vouch for you, so it's become a lot more difficult for outsiders to enter the Black Wind Sea," Qin Zhang prefaced. "I've always heard that the Black Wind Sea is different from other places in the Immortal realm in that it's a relatively isolated area, and that the majority of its cultivators are descendants of the earthly immortals there, so they can't be faulted for trying to mitigate risk. Tell me about the spot that you have, fellow Taoist Qin," Han Li said. There didn't appear to have been any urgency in Han Li's demeanor at all, so Qin Zhang could only continue. "My spot doesn't actually belong to me. Instead, it belongs to a good friend of mine. She was originally planning to go to the Black Wind Sea for some business matters, but she just so happened to have reached a critical juncture in her cultivation and requires some pills, and that's why she's trying to sell her spot." "I see, but if the teleportation spots really are so sought after, then surely she would have been able to sell it long ago instead of holding it to this point. So why does she still have it?" Han Li asked. "To tell you the truth, this friend of mine is rather short on funds at the moment, so she's asking quite a steep price for this spot," Qin Zhang revealed. Han Li was actually rather relieved to hear this, and he asked, "How much is she asking for the spot?" 15 immortal origin stones, Qin Zhang replied after a brief hesitation. 15. If I recall correctly, each spot used to cost 5 immortal origin stones, Han Li said as he raised an eyebrow. "The spots are still selling for 5 immortal origin stones each, but as you know, demand is quite high right now, and spots have occasionally popped up in the black market for around 10 immortal origin stones each. Furthermore, the black market sellers aren't responsible for finding anyone to vouch for you. 15 immortal origin stones is a little steep, but my friend's clan is a very influential one in this area, and they can vouch for you free of charge," Qin Zhang replied. "I see." Han Li stroked his own chin as a contemplative look appeared on his face, seemingly weighing up his options. "You're probably not aware of this, fellow Taoist Liu, but at the moment, the Black Wind Sea is increasingly tightening regulations on its teleportation formations. All those who enter and exit the Black Wind Sea are thoroughly examined, and if anyone causes any trouble in the Black Wind Sea, then the power that vouched for them would receive a very severe punishment. Hence, the reputable powers in the city normally aren't willing to vouch for outsiders, and even if you pay someone to do so, 5 immortal origin stones may not get the job done," Qin Zhang hurriedly added. "In that case, why are you so certain that your friend's clan would be willing to vouch for me?" Han Li asked. "My friend has already considered this eventuality, so she requested me to get to know someone before I offer them the teleportation spot. We've only just met, but I can tell through our conversation on the way here that you're not some heinous individual," Qin Zhang explained with a smile. Han Li nodded in response. "All right, then I agree to your offer." A hint of elation flashed through Qin Zhang's eyes upon hearing this, and he hurriedly said, "In that case, I'll notify my friend to come here right away." "All right, I'll wait here, please be back soon," Han Li replied with a nod. Qin Zhang downed his cup of wine, then rose to his feet and cupped his fist toward Han Li in a parting salute before quickly leaving the booth. Following his departure, Han Li also rose to his feet, then made his way over to the window and cast his gaze toward the white pagoda in the distance with furrowed brows. It seemed that some significant changes had taken place in the Black Wind Sea since his departure, and he wasn't sure if he had made the right decision in coming back. An hour passed by in the blink of an eye, and Qin Zhang finally returned with a smile on his face. Trailing along behind him was a figure dressed in white, wearing a veiled conical hat that obscured her features. The figure lifted the veil to reveal a set of stunning features, but her skin was abnormally pale, as if there were a layer of frost over her skin, and her entire body was giving off a glacial aura. "Sorry to keep you waiting for so long, fellow Taoist Li," Qin Zhang said in an apologetic manner. "It's fine," Han Li replied with a nod, then cast an inquisitive gaze toward the woman in white. "That's right, this is the friend of mine who has the teleportation spot." Qin Zhang took a glance at the woman as he spoke, and his eyes were filled with affection, clearly indicating that he was head over heels for her. The woman blushed slightly and glared at Qin Zhang in a shy manner, but there was a hint of affection in her eyes as well. Both of them had clearly been cultivating for countless years, yet they were acting like a pair of young lovebirds, and Han Li couldn't help but roll his eyes internally upon seeing this. "My name is Zhu Luo. It's a pleasure to meet you, fellow Taoist Liu," the woman said to Han Li in a slightly shy manner. "The pleasure is all mine, celestial maiden Zhu. Would I be able to see the teleportation token?" Han Li asked. Both Qin Zhang and Zhu Luo were at the pinnacle of the body integration stage, and the latter's aura was fluctuating slightly, and that was a precursor for an imminent breakthrough. Of course. Zhu Luo pulled out a palm-sized black badge, and on one side was inscribed the words "Black Wind," while teleportation was inscribed on the other. The badge was identical to the one that Han Li had once received from the master of Black Wind Island, and he inspected it briefly before giving a nod, then swept a sleeve over the table to produce 10 Immortal Origin Stones. Zhu Luo's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and Qin Zhang's face also fell slightly as he said, "Fellow Taoist Liu, we agreed on 15 Immortal Origin Stones. Truth be told, I'm a little short on funds at the moment as well, and I only have 10 Immortal Origin Stones. Can I substitute the remaining 5 Immortal Origin Stones with these?" Han Li swept a sleeve over the table once again as he spoke, and 5 fist-sized white crystals appeared, all of which were giving off wisps of glacial qi. Of course, he didn't care about a mere 5 Immortal Origin Stones. Instead, the problem was that he was posing as a body integration cultivator at the moment, and it would have been far too eye-catching for him to easily produce 15 Immortal Origin Stones. In the Black Wind Sea, even an early true immortal stage earthly immortal wasn't guaranteed to have 15 Immortal Origin Stones in their possession. "These are Frost Soul Crystals." Zhu Luo was ecstatic at the sight of the white crystals, and she immediately picked one up for a closer inspection. Qin Zhang was about to raise some objections, but he immediately decided to hold his tongue upon seeing Zhu Luo's reaction. "I would like to substitute these 5 Frost Soul Crystals for 5 Immortal Origin Stones. Will that be all right?" Han Li asked. "That's perfectly fine," Zhu Luo immediately replied with a nod, then immediately stowed the crystals away as if she were afraid that Han Li would change his mind. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he also stowed the badge away in an unhurried manner. "Fellow Taoist Liu, I'll have to trouble you to come with me to my clan to finalize the vouching proceedings," Zhu Luo said. "That's fine, thank you, Celestial Maiden Zhu," Han Li replied with a nod. Zhu Luo hesitated momentarily, then cast a hopeful gaze toward Han Li as she asked, "Also, would you happen to have more of these Frost Soul Crystals?" "Why do you ask? Would you like to buy some?" Han Li asked. Zhu Luo exchanged a glance with Qin Zhang, then replied, "These crystals are very useful to me, so if you do have some more, I'm willing to purchase them from you. If you have any Frost Soul Crystals to spare, you'll be doing us a huge favor, and if you need any help from me, I'll be sure to heed your call," Qin Zhang immediately chimed in. Han Li took a glance at the duo, then swept a sleeve over the table to produce a pair of white crystals as he said, I do actually have 2 more Frost Soul crystals. Each of these 2 Frost Soul crystals was around twice the size of each of the previous 5, and Zhu Luo was ecstatic to see this, but she refrained from immediately reaching out for the crystals. Instead, she took a deep breath then asked, would you be able to sell them to me, fellow Taoist Liu? I'll be sure to give you satisfactory compensation. I came across these Frost Soul crystals by chance anyway, so if you want them, I can give them to you free of charge, Han Li said as he pushed the 2 Frost Soul crystals toward Zhu Luo. A hint of surprise flashed through Zhu Luo's eyes upon hearing this, and she shook her head as she replied, I can't just accept such a precious gift free of charge. Please state a price, fellow Taoist. In that case, how about this? Seeing as you come from a prominent clan in Wave View City, I'm sure you must have many information sources. Has anything major happened in the Black Wind Sea recently? Also, why has the Black Wind Sea suddenly become so much stricter in its examination of people seeking to enter the region? If you can answer those 2 questions, I'll give you these 2 Frost Soul crystals, Han Li said. A hint of elation flashed through the eyes of Zhu Luo and Qin Zhang upon hearing this, and the former asked, is that a serious offer? Most certainly so, Han Li replied without any hesitation. Zhu Luo took a moment to gather her thoughts, then said, while Wave View City and the Black Wind City are only separated by a single teleportation formation, there's not much flow of information between the 2 places, so we don't know much ourselves. When it comes to major events taking place in the Black Wind Sea, all we've heard of is the battle between Black Wind Island and Azure Feather Island. Recently, the battle has gradually risen to the fore, and it's becoming more and more intense. Do you know if other more secluded parts of the Black Wind Sea have also gotten swept up in this conflict? Han Li asked. I'm not sure about that, but I've heard from some people who came from the Black Wind Sea that the battle is still limited to only the central region, while the areas outside of that are still relatively peaceful. That's all I know about the situation, Zhu Luo replied. Han Li nodded in response. Given what he had just heard, Dark Veil Island was most likely still untouched. By the way, I heard from a fellow Taoist who came from the Black Wind Sea about a decade ago mentioned an event that took place there that had apparently caused quite a stir, Qin Zhang suddenly said. Oh, what exactly was this event? Han Li asked with a hint of intrigue in his eyes. I'm not sure about the exact details, but apparently the castaway gale around some parts of the Black Wind Sea had suddenly converged inward, destroying several islands in the process, Qin Zhang replied. I heard about that as well. The castaway gale is a natural barrier that isolates the Black Wind Sea from the rest of the Immortal region, and it's already existed for countless years, but never had anything like that happen before that point, Zhu Luo chimed in. I see. Would either of you be able to provide an answer to my second question? Han Li asked. Zhu Luo and Qin Zhang exchanged a glance before both of them shook their heads in response. Many people in Wave View City have actually been trying to find out why the regulations have suddenly become so strict, but no one has been able to get to the bottom of things so far. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly in contemplation as he replied, I see. In any case, you've managed to answer one of my questions, so you can have one of these Frost Soul crystals. Thank you, fellow Taoist Liu. Zhu Luo picked up one of the crystals before stowing it away, then cast her gaze toward the other crystal as she asked, would you be willing to sell this Frost Soul crystal for 2 Immortal Origin stones? Han Li didn't refuse this offer, and the 3 of them remained in the booth for a while longer before departing. Han Li made a trip to the Zhu clan with the duo, and it was a large trading house situated in the eastern part of Wave View City. Zhu Luo proved to be quite trustworthy, quickly finalizing the vouching proceedings for Han Li. With that, both sides had gotten what they wanted, and it was a win-win situation. Han Li tactfully turned down Zhu Luo's offer to stay and enjoy the Zhu clan's hospitality, then promptly departed. That went quite smoothly, Taoist Zai remarked in Han Li's mind. Indeed, Han Li replied as he flipped a hand over to produce a white badge. On one side of the badge was engraved the image of a strange white bird with a flat head and an eagle beak, while on the other side was inscribed the character for Zhu. This was the Zhu clan's token, and it had been given to him by Zhu Luo. A contemplative look appeared in Han Li's eyes as he inspected the white badge. "Is there something wrong with the badge?" Taoist Zai asked. "No, I just feel like the bird engraved on it is rather interesting," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. He had seen this design in the Black Wind Sea before, and if he recalled correctly, it was the symbol of a large island near Dark Veil Island, an island by the name of Snow Kite Island. According to the records on Dark Veil Island, everyone on the entirety of Snow Kite Island suddenly vanished tens of thousands of years ago, and that was still an unsolved mystery to date. Han Li was wondering whether the Zhu clan was somehow tied to Snow Kite Island, but he quickly rid himself of that trivial train of thought and stowed the badge away as a hint of concern appeared on his face. "Are you still concerned about the changes that have taken place in the Black Wind Sea? Didn't you say that the most formidable cultivator there is the master of Black Wind Sea, and he's only a late true immortal stage earthly immortal? If that's the case, surely you have nothing to fear," Taoist Zai said. "That may be true, but for some reason I can't shake off this feeling of unease," Han Li replied. "I think you're getting a little paranoid from constantly having to worry about being apprehended by the heavenly court," Taoist Zai said. "Perhaps so," Han Li replied in a self-deprecating manner, but the concern on his face wasn't eased in the slightest. As they were speaking with one another, Han Li arrived on a street in the eastern part of the city. It was noon at the moment, and the street was teeming with people, most of whom possessed lofty cultivation bases. There was no lack of spatial tempering and body integration cultivators among them, and they were most likely itinerant cultivators who had come here to purchase different things. Most of the shops that lined the street were material shops, and all of the spirit plants and demon beast materials sold inside were quite fresh, clearly indicating that they had been recently acquired. Han Li wanted to take his mind off his current concerns, so he began wandering aimlessly through the shops. Waveview City wasn't very large, and it didn't have many shops, but there was a high degree of diversity in the wares on offer, and he was able to find some things that he needed, thereby improving his mood. Shortly thereafter, he drew to a halt in front of one of the larger material shops, then cast his gaze into the shop to find that it was selling a large range of products, all of which had been placed on around a dozen shelves. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he made his way inside, and right at this moment, a white-robed young man just so happened to come out of the shop. The two of them passed each other by, and Han Li stopped in his tracks before turning to look at the white-robed young man's departing figure with a hint of surprise in his eyes. The white-robed young man was displaying a late body integration stage cultivation, but Han Li was immediately able to identify him as an early true immortal cultivator. The aura concealment method that he was using was quite advanced, and Han Li may not have been able to see through his cover had it not been for his immense spiritual sense. The white-robed young man didn't notice Han Li's gaze, and he quickly vanished into the crowd, while Han Li withdrew his gaze and stepped into the shop. It was a very normal occurrence for cultivators to conceal their cultivation base. After all, he was doing the exact same thing. As soon as Han Li entered the shop, he was immediately greeted by the hospitable shopkeeper. "What can I help you with today?" Close to a day later, Han Li had already visited all of the shops in the city, and he had found several good materials, as well as 2 types of rare spirit plant seeds. Perhaps it was because this was a newly constructed city in a rather secluded location, but there was no immortal outlet here, and that put Han Li slightly more at ease. At this moment, he was standing in the central area of the city, not far away from the White Pagoda. Under the night sky, the pagoda was giving off a faint white glow that matched the luster of the moon, presenting a marvelous spectacle to behold. At this moment, the gates of the pagoda were tightly shut, making it impossible for anyone to see inside. Han Li didn't use his spiritual sense to forcibly inspect the interior of the pagoda, and after staying there for a while longer, he turned to depart, renting a room in a secluded inn to the west of the city before going into seclusion. Han Li stayed in the secret chamber in the inn for close to 2 years. During this time, he occasionally came out of seclusion a few times in disguise, but only to visit all of the shops in the city, keeping an eye on any news about the Immortal Palace while also checking to see if there were any spirit materials worth buying. Perhaps it was because the Black Wind Sea was truly too secluded, but even up to this point, the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace still hadn't sent anyone to Wave View City. However, news of what had happened in the Blaze Dragon Dao had still managed to travel here, and it had become the most shocking piece of news in the entire Northern Glacial Immortal region in recent years. Han Li naturally paid some extra attention to this news, and he was quite relieved to hear that Taoist Hu Yan hadn't fallen into the hands of the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace. However, at the same time, he was a little perplexed about why Taoist Hu Yan wasn't also a wanted fugitive in the immortal outlets. Aside from that, Bailey Yan appeared to have still been alive as well. Han Li didn't have any ties to him, but he was still happy to see that Bailey Yan hadn't met his demise. After all, he was currently wanted by the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, so it definitely wasn't a bad thing that Bailey Yan was diverting their attention away from him. One day, at the center of Wave View City, a burst of dazzling light erupted out of the 5-story White Pagoda, and a pillar of blue light rose up from its rooftop straight into the heavens. At this moment, many of the cultivators in the city were gathered around the pagoda, watching the cultivators entering the pagoda with undisguised envy on their faces. All those who were entering the pagoda had naturally obtained teleportation spots, and it had been said that many cultivators had reaped benefits from the Black Wind Sea of late. This was the primary reason why Wave View City was already so prosperous despite being such a new city. In the crowd was a fair-skinned scholar holding a folding fan, and he was staring at the White Pagoda in an expressionless manner, making it unclear what he was thinking. All of a sudden, he emerged from the crowd and stowed his folding fan away as he strode toward the pagoda. This person was none other than Han Li in disguise. After entering the pagoda, he passed through a short corridor to arrive in a spacious hall that was over 1,000 feet in size, and on either side of the hall's entrance stood a cultivator wearing Black Wind Island robes. "Please display your teleportation badge and vouching token," the black-robed cultivator on the left said to Han Li in a calm manner. Han Li flipped a hand over to produce the 2 requested objects before handing them over. The black-robed cultivator summoned a white jade tablet, which released a burst of white light that enveloped the 2 objects, following which a pair of fist-sized golden runes appeared on the tablet before vanishing in a flash. "Right this way, fellow Taoist," the black-robed cultivator on the right said as he gestured toward the entrance of the hall. Han Li gave a slight nod in response, then made his way inside. The hall was rectangular in shape, and the floor was paved with pristine white jade bricks. There were countless runes engraved upon the surrounding walls, and they were giving off a white glow that illuminated the entire hall. Aside from several Black Wind Island cultivators, There were already around 24 cultivators dressed in different attire waiting inside the hall. The teleportation formation was situated at the very back of the hall, and even though it hadn't been activated yet, it was already giving off bursts of faint spatial fluctuations. Han Li's arrival didn't attract much attention, drawing only a few glances from some of the cultivators, while everyone else paid no heed to him. He casually swept his gaze across the hall while making his way over to an empty corner of the hall, where he sat down with his legs crossed. His expression remained unchanged, but he was actually rather intrigued to notice that the white-robed cultivator, who had been concealing his own cultivation base, that he had encountered upon first entering Wave View City, was standing no more than 200 feet away from him. This wouldn't have been worthy of note on its own. After all, it wasn't a strange occurrence for a true immortal to travel to the Black Wind Sea. What had truly caught Han Li's attention was that there were 5 or 6 cultivators around the white-robed young man, all of whom were also true immortals that were only revealing body integration stage cultivation bases. In particular, one of them, a middle-aged man with a square face and thin eyebrows, was at the late true immortal stage, ranking alongside Han Li as the 2 most formidable cultivators present. It was rather noteworthy that such a formidable force was collectively traveling to the Black Wind Sea, but as long as they didn't get in his way, Han Li certainly wasn't going to meddle in their business. Time slowly passed by, and around a dozen more cultivators had arrived in the next 2 hours. Right at this moment, a black-robed elderly man emerged as he declared, "Sorry to keep you all waiting, everyone. It's almost time for the teleportation formation to be activated." The declaration immediately caused a stir among the crowd, and all of the cultivators who were meditating had opened their eyes and risen to their feet. Han Li rose to his feet alongside everyone else, and he discovered that he had met this black-robed elderly man once before. It was the itinerant immortal referred to as Elder Yi. "I'm sure you're all aware that things are a bit different nowadays than they were before, so prior to entering the Black Wind Sea, I'll have to get all of you to pass through this sensory formation," the black-robed elderly man said as he raised a hand and made a hand seal. Several of the jade bricks on the floor between the elderly man and everyone else abruptly lit up with golden light, following which a series of golden runes flew out from within, quickly intertwining in midair to form a ring of golden light that was around 10 feet in size. Inside the golden ring, balls of golden light of different sizes were whizzing incessantly through the air. A hint of blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and he discovered that every single one of these balls of light was formed by countless golden seal text runes. His expression remained unchanged, but his heart sank slightly upon seeing this. Most of the cultivators present seemed to have already been aware that this was going to happen, and aside from a few who displayed surprised reactions, the rest began to pass through the ring of light one after another. Whenever someone passed through the rings of light, the balls of golden light around it would shudder slightly and display some minute changes. Meanwhile, Elder Yi's gaze remained fixed firmly on the ring of light this entire time, seemingly observing something. Before long, around a dozen people had already passed through the ring of life and entered the teleportation formation. Even the white-robed cultivator that Han Li had noticed earlier had already passed through the ring of light, and up to this point, no abnormalities had been displayed. Instead of immediately approaching the ring of light, Han Li made his way over to a purple-haired body integration stage young woman beside him as he said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist. I am Luo Feng of Dark Vale Island. I had to leave the Black Wind Sea due to clan matters several hundred years ago, and at the time, this procedure hadn't been implemented. Could it be that something's recently happened in the Black Wind Sea?" Judging from her attire, she seemed to have been a cultivator from Cedar Gift Island, which Han Li recalled was affiliated with Black Wind Island. The purple-haired woman was just about to make her way toward the ring of light when she stopped in her tracks, then turned to Han Li as she explained, "If you've been away for several centuries, then it's no surprise that you don't know about this. This is a new rule established by Island Master Luo a century ago, and I don't know the exact reasons why, but it seems to have something to do with a certain evil cultivator." "I see. Thank you for enlightening me, fellow Taoist," Han Li replied with a smile as he cupped his fist in a salute. The purple-haired young woman waved a casual hand before making her way forward. Meanwhile, Han Li's mind was racing as he cast his gaze toward the ring of golden light once again. His first thought upon hearing mention of an evil cultivator was that it had to have been himself. After all, he had killed Tao Yu, who was clearly a very important figure, and it would have only made sense for him to have been deemed an evil cultivator by the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace. However, he then quickly decided that this most likely wasn't the case. Not only had he not heard of any ties between Black Wind Island and the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace prior to this, the fact that this restriction had already been set up for a century indicated that it clearly had nothing to do with him. After all, back then, he was still in the Blaze Dragon Dao and hadn't done anything out of line. Aside from that, the white-robed cultivator hadn't triggered any reaction from the restriction, so it seemed that this restriction didn't pay any heed to one's true cultivation base. As these thoughts were flashing through Han Li's mind, more cultivators continued to pass through the golden formation. At this point, there was barely anyone left around him, and the other true immortals that had concealed their true cultivation bases had also stepped into the teleportation formation. Thus, he took a deep breath before stepping into the ring of golden light. The surrounding balls of golden light shuddered in unison, following which a burst of gentle force instantly enveloped his entire body, flowing over him like trickling water. Han Li's expression remained unchanged as he continued. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. All the while, Elder Yi continued to scrutinize the golden formation with his hands clasped behind his back. The ring of golden light didn't encompass a very large area, and Han Li was able to pass through it in just a few steps without any mishaps, much to his relief. Shortly thereafter, the remaining few cultivators also passed through the sensory restriction without any incident. Only then did Elder Yi give a slight nod before sweeping a sleeve through the air to wave away the restriction. At the same time, streaks of blue light shot out of his other sleeve before landing upon Han Li and the others, revealing a series of blue talismans. In the next instant, the teleportation formation lit up with dazzling radiance, and Han Li's entire field of view was completely filled with white light. A long while later, the scene around him stabilized once again, and he found himself situated within a circular hall. This was the interior of Black Wind Island's Heavenly Star Pagoda, so Han Li had some recollection of this place. A hunchbacked elderly woman wearing a black robe was standing in front of the formation, and she smiled as she declared, "Welcome to the Black Wind Sea, fellow Taoists." Everyone cupped their fists in a collective salute toward the elderly woman before stepping out of the formation and making their way toward a nearby archway. Han Li was walking slowly among the crowd, and all of a sudden he slowed down slightly, seemingly having noticed something. Just now, he had noticed out of the corner of his eye that the white-robed cultivator wasn't following the crowd. Instead, he had stopped in the hall after stepping out of the teleportation formation, and the same applied to all of the other concealed true immortals as well. The hunchbacked elderly woman didn't raise any objections to this, and Han Li became even more curious about who these people were.